A guy has been suffering on Tianmen Mountain in Seljiang for half a month. But he still managed to find them there full of strange characters. But they're definitely original manuscripts. Rumored to be a legendary secret technique, it was left behind by a master nicknamed Immortal Sword some 600 years ago. The secret records of the Immortal Sword. He would have been more than happy to keep them, but for him, with the damaged part of his body where the chi is, it doesn't make sense. Other martial artists would try to steal them from him if they knew he had them. He'll have to hide them before anyone sees them. The guy found no better solution than to just take it and swallow it, thinking he should have brought water with him. The head of the Golden Dragon clan and a member of the Martial Arts Alliance, Mo Youngsu, found him and asked, had the blood cult spy discovered the secret recording of the Immortal Sword Master? He replied to the gentleman that he had found them, but had put them in a safe place. He would give the records back if he kept his promise. One of the 4 elders of the Martial Arts Alliance, Baekwahan, said that he heard about it when he went there. He wanted to remove the blood parasite from his chest, right? The master replied that it was, but they had no need to fulfill it. Even if they removed the parasite, it would have nowhere to go back to, isn't he right? Seo Woon Wai of the Seo clan, originally from Ien. He was expelled from the clan after his dantian was destroyed due to the qi raging in his body. Then, 10 years ago, he was kidnapped by the blood cult and a parasite was placed in his chest. He's been forced to be a puppet of the blood cult ever since. Even if he gains his freedom, where will he go? Or is Mr. Mo Yunsu wrong? He's obviously found out everything about him. Seo Woon Wai asked what he wanted to say with all this. Master asked him to give him all the secret records of the Immortal Sword. If he just gave him the tapes, so be it. He'd consider getting the parasite out of the guy's chest. Seo Woon Wai answered him that the secret records were hidden in a place that only he knows. He knows the situation of a guy who isn't asking for any special privileges like acceptance into an orthodox sect. The guy just wants to leave the blood cult and live like a normal person. If they are the first to rid him of the bloodworm, he will gladly fulfill his obligations. He's undoubtedly cunning. The master said it's obvious that a lowly spy would be hiding something. He's betting the guy's hiding them inside his body. They were planning to kill him from the beginning. Mr. Seo Woon Wai told Seo Woon Wai not to hate them so much. He was destined to die the moment he became a spy. The boy didn't understand how he had come to live like this. After injuring the guy, the gentleman saw that he had cut the secret records that were inside Seo Woon Wai. But then something strange started to happen. Blue flames started oozing out of the guy's body. He thought it wasn't even hot, so it wasn't real fire. It doesn't make any difference. If there's a second life, he hopes it won't be as miserable as this one. They poured a bucket of water on him. It got cold. His body, he's got no scars from the cuts. And he doesn't even have any burn marks. Someone called him a pathetic ass. That voice. The guy said he finally woke up. Sung Ja Baek and Sung Woo Hyun are self-proclaimed dual Hunan Dao, the infamous black and white ghost twins from the blood cult. He didn't understand why they looked so young. And he himself had just died from the blue flames. The guys asked what was wrong with him. Why was he so surprised? He realized it was him in his youth. One of the guys kicked him and asked if he was still sober. He yelled at him to get up and pay already. Seo Woon Wai thought it hurt like hell. Too much to be a dream. The guy stood up and grabbed one of the twins by the sinew, asking what date today was. The other one replied to initially let go. He asked again and said that it was not a difficult question. Sun Ja Baek replied that it was August 9th, 11. The guy thought that if today is August 9th, 11, it's exactly 10 years before his death. Sung Woo Hyun said he drank a lot, so he went crazy from drinking. He hugged one of the twins and said he was glad to see them there. And then he remembered something, since it was exactly 10 years ago. The guy saw how many guests there were at this late hour. He shouted for someone to come out and greet them. Seo Woon Wai frantically searched for something. He didn't realize where it was, because he had to get ready. The twins asked him if he had any money. He said that if he didn't want to die, he should leave now. They said he was acting normal. They think the kid needs to be taught a lesson. He finally found the only memory of his mother, the sword of Sodam. He regretted after losing it in his previous life. Even if escape is the first priority, but this sword he must take with him. The guy didn't realize what it was. He thought he was going deaf. The twins thought it was coming from the street. Seo Woon-wai realized that it was too loud to come from the street. Now was not the time for reasoning. Those shouts meant that it had begun. They began to wonder who those guys were, and what they should do. Seo Woon-wai told them to move over to look too. He saw the blood cult bastards there. It was on this day, August 9th 11, that he was kidnapped by the blood cult. Sun Jia-bek asked the guy if they were bandits. He said no, they were cultists from the blood cult. If they want to survive, they should run away right now. One of the twins asked, are they really cultists? He thought they had disappeared long ago, after being defeated by the Martial Arts Alliance. Why didn't he go down and ask them himself? Looking at each other, the twins realized they should too. Now is not the time to look after them. After they're kidnapped, they'll become martial artists. As long as he can survive, it's okay. Now that he thought about it, he remembered that there was another man with them. And Sung had also come with them. He was the only one who was on his side in the Shining Earth clan. He can't abandon someone who is like a brother to him. When he ran into the boy's room, he shouted at him to get up. Sung was frightened and said he didn't expect to see the young master. He told him to get up quickly, they had to leave right away. The boy didn't understand anything and asked the Lord what was wrong. He said they were attacked by a blood cult. They'll get there soon. Sung asked, isn't the exit the other way? The master told him that they couldn't go that way, the whole city was surrounded, and they would be caught as soon as they went out. The boy asked fearfully, then what if they went back to the room and hid in the closet? Seo Woon-wai replied that it was obvious. They're not there to take their money. They're there to catch people like them. They'll search all the most obvious places first, like in closets or big pots. It would be found right away. The boy asked, so are they destined to be captured and killed? They need to hide in a place where they're not expecting anyone. Someplace they wouldn't go even if they thought about it. Sung asked if this was the place the young master was talking about. He replied that yes, that's right. They don't expect anyone to be hiding there. The boy asked, are they going to hide in the bathroom? He was against that option. The master left him the only restroom. Even the blood cult won't look in there. He was originally going to hide there, but he has no choice. He needs to find a place to hide before the blood cult gets there, so he's not destined to die after all. It was a good hiding place. They'd be looking for a runaway horse, not digging through its feed, but if there are advanced martial artists, they will find him with their abilities. He should have his sword at the ready just in case. Somebody started saying it's very dirty. And don't let the boy hold it with his sticky hands. The boy didn't understand what those noises were. What does he think it is? Telling him to wipe his dirty hands. He ignored it because of that short sword? Seo Woon-wai didn't understand. Was the sword possessed by a ghost? The sword of Sodam. Mom's prized possession that he had just stuffed in his bag. Did he just answer, can he hear him? If he can hear the voice of the sword, can he also see his avatar? The guy didn't understand. Is this a hallucination? It must not be true. He repeated that he couldn't see her. She replied that she does, he can see and hear her. They swords can read a person's mind when they are in close proximity to a person. He asked her to be quiet. She asked if it was because of that guy. And she said it was okay, only he could hear her. Seeing the shoe marks on the ground, the man began to walk toward the stall. The avatar asked if the man found him. Would the guy kill him? Does it matter if he has the strength to do it? She asks if he has the courage to do it. How fast his heart beats. He's afraid. He's afraid? No, he's excited. Let him watch him. He will endure in this life in spite of all obstacles. Avatar said he was good. She thought he was just an idiot who drinks with the So family siblings every day. Looks like she should reconsider. She asked where did he learn how to do that. Seo Woon-wai said she was annoying, so she should just shut up. It's no use her talking to him in there. He thought he should just ignore her. She can hear everything. The situation is getting worse. Blood cult warriors are known to move in groups of 3 during their missions. The partners of the cultist he killed will be there soon. Even though he hid the body, it's only a matter of time before they find it. If he was in a situation like this, they wouldn't even try to talk to him, they'd just kill him on the spot. In the meantime, he needed to deal with this and get out of there. The avatar turned to him. The boy asked what this time? She can't just leave him alone so he can just focus. She replied that she'd like to do that too, but he had a blood cult warrior behind him, so she thought he should know. Turning around, he saw him. The guy asked, was he interrupting? Let him not be bothered and carry on. He was interested in watching him. Or was he already done? How long has he been standing there? No, he was much more interested in his belt. Brown belt, he's a mid-ranking warrior. He had to act faster. If he was a mid-ranked warrior, he didn't have a single chance to win with his current skills. The Avatar asked, he's going to fight, should she get some help? He's already told her, she keeps distracting him. He overestimates himself. The guy said it didn't look like he had studied martial arts. Even if there was a surprise attack, he was impressive in dealing with a low-ranked warrior. Toth asked, is he about average? He offered him a deal. If Seo Woon-wai surrendered, he would keep him alive. He thought it was a good idea to try to provoke him. The guy replied that if he wanted to kill him, he wouldn't talk about his level. So he wants to grab him, but he's afraid that if he fights, he'll end up like that warrior. The boy didn't understand what he said. Avatar asked, is he out of his mind? Is he trying to capitalize on something that will provoke him? The guy said it's all going according to his plan. He would purposely look like a cocky brat so that he would act more light-hearted. Laughing, he said the guy was very cocky. The one said he was also skilled in guile, so he shouldn't have wanted to kill him. Looks like he's more vigilant than the guy thought. The blood cult warrior said he must want to avoid the fight any way he can. Well, he's about to find out. Is he as skilled as his brain and tongue? Even if he's a third-rate warrior whose Dantian was destroyed, he still sees a lot. Grabbing the guy's hand, he told him slowly, his eyes may be good, but his hands are slow. Still, his counterattack was pretty accurate now. The warrior will ignore the fact that he killed a low-ranking warrior. So let him follow in silence. The guy thought he wasn't going anywhere. He did manage to attack. Couldn't have been a warrior dodging a point-blank punch? Seo Woon-wai was overconfident. I thought he wouldn't be able to dodge at such a close range. He has no choice but to fight him head-on. The Avatar offered to help him, because without her, Seo Woon-wai has no chance of winning. He asked what she could even do in such a situation. So he would be stubborn to the end, then what would he do now? He couldn't make a deep cut, but since he'd robbed him of his left eye, he'd have to strike from that side. The guy said he was trying to be polite. But he freaking bastard wants to die so badly? He was originally going to mess with him a bit, and send him to the cult, but he changed his mind, he's going to have to kill him. He's gonna tear him apart. That's the blood cult's basic sword art, killing bloody blade. Too fast that he can't even see its movements. The bastard's dodging deadly attacks on purpose. The warrior asked, beginning to realize what he'd done. He's going to abuse him until he's dead. It was too late for him to regret. He was already doomed to die. Seo Woon-wai realized that he was constantly using the same techniques against him. What should he do? Just punch and hope for the best. The Avatar tipped him off about the front kick. The warrior didn't understand how it happened. Seo Woon-wai didn't understand how he blocked the attack. She said that very well, he actually blocked that attack. If she hadn't helped, he'd be dead by now. That was her voice. So she can see his attacks? Told him because she'd seen them. The third-rate antics of such a worm are easy to spot. What's he gonna do now? Is she gonna keep her mouth shut? Seo Woon-wai apologized for ignoring her twice. She will help him, right? She replied that she would not let the rare creature who was the first to hear her in 47 years die. She said okay. Does he have a plan if she spells out his attacks to him? He's thinking about it. But it's difficult in his condition. He had already made contact once. So he won't go near his sword again. That guy will try to keep his distance. However, if he provokes him once more, then there will be a chance. The warrior stood there and didn't understand how Seo Woon-wai had blocked the last strike. Could it be that he had figured out his sword art? No, he was probably just lucky. There was no way such a third-rate could do it. The guy yelled that he was going to kill him. The Avatar said it was time to get started. First of all, he must attack him and stall for time. He replied that he was ready, just let him say the trajectory of his sword. The warrior didn't know how he did it. He could barely see anything with his left eye. The Avatar had told him that if he was in his blind spot, he'd get nervous. The blind counterattack may be inaccurate, but it will be faster than last time. He's bound to make a horizontal lunge. Let him wait for the moment before attacking. But the warrior read his every move. Did he think he would take him by surprise? And with one powerful punch, Seo Woon-wai was a few meters away from him. Did the pathetic brat break his arm? He asked. It was impressive of him to use a warrior's blind spot, but he's still a third-rate. He's a lowlife, let him die. It was at this moment that Seo Woon-wai gathered his will in his fist and reacted at the right time. He succeeded and killed the warrior. Avatar asked if he was okay. Could he stand? His acting was very impressive. For a moment, she thought he'd broken his arm, too. The guy replied that if he had been a little more attentive, he wouldn't have succeeded. His final attack was cool, too. Retracting his legs and spinning, he was able to slit his throat. It was possible because she had helped him. He thanked Sodam. Even though she's a short sword, he asked what's wrong? Why did she suddenly get excited? She replied that she was just a little surprised. If he was so grateful, why didn't he clean the blood off the blade? Seo Woon-wai asked, is she angry? The Avatar replied that she wasn't, and let her clean the rust off. His mom took terrible care of her heirlooms. And then she shouted sharply to the guy behind her. The man said what an amazing situation. He rushed there because his 2 men didn't come back, and they were killed by an ordinary kid. Seo Woon-wai from Yang District, Woyang City. The So clan is from Woyang. He is quite famous in Hunan Province. After his dantian was destroyed by the rampaging Qi, he became an outcast in his family. Someone asked, what if they took him and raised him as a spy from an orthodox sect? The man replied that there was no point in practicing a defect that didn't have dantian. He'll die before he can get through basic training. Let him look at him. Even though he's from a famous clan, he peed his pants in fear. What could they possibly use crap like him for? He doesn't even qualify as a low-grade commodity. Let them kill him. Sobbing, Seo Woon-wai asked to be spared. He tried to avoid this fate, but he made the same mistake again. No, maybe it wasn't the same. This time he found himself with his hands tied behind his back. Turning to Sodam, he asked her how long he had been out. Why isn't she answering? Perhaps it is because the sword is not in his hands? Apparently, he can only speak to the sword if it's in his hands. He said it's amazing, a boy without dantian, and yet he killed 2 of his men with that short sword. He thinks the boy is still the heir to the clan even though he lost his dantian. Yet he killed 2 of his men with that short sword. The man thinks he is still the heir to the martial clan even though he lost his dantian. Seo Woon-wai thought that his opinion of him was much higher than in his previous life. Blood cult, very judicious bastards, so with that said, they would probably grab him. The guy was trying to come to his senses. Eventually they would be captured anyway. He tried to look on the bright side. For one thing, he'd need to survive to think about escape. A man said they weren't going to take him with them. The other man told the captain that the boy was at least average. If they raise him well, he would be useful as a spy. However, there are many guys with dantian who would be useful as spies compared to this lowlife without dantian. Is there any reason why they should use a defective specimen? Let them just kill him. Seo Woon-wai thought that the only thing that had changed was his opinion of the guy. He had come to the same conclusion. He thought he had no choice. I guess I'll have to beg, just like in his previous life. The boy begged to be spared and said he would do whatever they wanted. The man said to just look at him. He tried to appreciate him, and now he's asking for mercy. Let him stop looking for a way out and pay for killing his men. This was worse than his last life. There's no escape. Let him think, at least it would buy him some time. He can't die any sooner than he did in his previous life after. The man said that watching him desperately looking for a way to escape is quite a fascinating sight. Why don't he just beg like a dog? That's when Seo Woon-wai noticed that sword. The man said he might be using it as a pet. The boy realized that he had seen that sword before. The white jewelry on the hilt of the sword, it must be that man. He bowed sharply and began to speak praise to the blood demon, and long live the blood cult. He was unworthy of being in the presence of a 4th blood star. They didn't know what he was talking about. What 4th blood star? Is it in there? The man asked why it was so noisy. There can't be someone like the 4th blood star in there. 11 leaders leading the blood cult. 4 honorable ones and 7 blood stars. He had never met one of them in his previous life, but he had heard rumors about the stars. Sometimes they disguised themselves as low-ranking warriors and watched the troops. It turns out those rumors were true. The man ordered him to raise his head. He said it's exciting because he's never been caught in an inspection before. The 4th star of the blood cult, Du Chanho. How did he recognize him even though he's not part of the blood cult? Seo Woon-wai replied that it was because of his sword. The boy replied, the jewelry on the sword and the leather wrapping on the hilt. Seo Woon-wai heard that it was made in memory of his old faithful stallion, a white stallion. The 4th star answered that he had a good eye. Now let him answer the question. How does someone who isn't part of a blood cult know that? The guy realized he was suspicious of him. Though it would probably be strange if he wasn't suspicious. But in his past life, he had been a spy for a blood cult for several years and was in an orthodox sect. He had been in similar situations hundreds of times. Seo Woon-wai replied that it was because he has the blood of the blood cult in his veins. He knows how to lie. Everyone around him was surprised that he claimed that there were descendants of the blood cult in the Seo clan of Luoyang. He went on to say that his maternal grandfather had fought in the Great Orthodox Heretical War as a low-ranking warrior in a unit of blood wolves. After being severely wounded in battle, he began to wander in search of a place to settle with his only kin, his mother. And just like that, his grandfather found himself in the city of Luoyang. He had trouble finding a home fleeing the war, but his internal wounds would not heal. His mother was trying to cover the accumulated medicine bills as a servant of the Seo clan. That's when she met his father, and he was born. His grandfather was a member of the Blood Wolf troop. The man said it was very interesting, let him keep talking. The boy wondered, wasn't that enough? When he was young, he had undergone intensive training from his grandfather. Whenever he complained that he couldn't handle the rigors of training, he remembered the captain of the Blood Wolf squad, No Jo Man, and his son, No Sung-gu. He told him the captain's son had managed to go through all the training of the Blood Wolf squad when he was his age. They didn't understand how this brat knew the names of the previous and current captains of the Blood Wolf squad. Grandfather said every day that one day the blood cult would find them. Even 5 years ago, his last words were a memory from the blood cultist. The man replied that clearly. It explained how he was able to kill 2 of their warriors despite the body with a shattered dantian. Only he wanted to continue speaking as the man shouted for Seo Woon-wai not to make him laugh. Let the blood star not listen to him. He doesn't know where he heard this, but the Blood Wolf squad. Here, the blood star asked Captain O, who allowed him to interrupt him. He didn't know that the captain of the demonic tiger squad could challenge the blood star's words. He fell to his knees and began to beg the Lord for leniency. Seo Woon-wai thought that for the captain to tremble in fear because of a few words and a glance thrown his way, so this was the blood star's authority. Blood star apologized about it, but there was something he found odd. Killing their cultists was justified in self-defense. But why didn't he reveal his identity to Captain O and instead begged for his life? The guy asked. It was because he was afraid that he might be punished for killing cultists despite his affiliation. He asked the Lord to ask him. Seo Woon-wai realized that he was being harsh. He did a good job of weaving the truth and lies together though. The guy didn't get caught in the lie and immediately pointed out the inconsistencies. Laughing, the man said his joke was too harsh. Indeed, he understood his reasons. If his grandfather, a blood cultist, then they are basically brothers. The boy was afraid that something was wrong. He said they almost lost an important descendant of the cult. The man would like to take him into the cult to continue the legacy of his grandfather's work. He asked, how about it? Seo Woon-wai replied to the 4th blood star that it would be an honor for him. His grandfather would be very pleased. He managed to survive, but in the end he volunteered to join the cult. What was the point of rebirth then? The blood demon told Seo Woon-wai to welcome him back to the cult. He managed to survive, of course, but he ended up back in the blood cult. If he had known this would happen, the man said that by fate they were destined to find the cult's descendants. He would grant his wish. He didn't understand what that meant. The blood star was going to grant the wish of such a lowlife? It felt like a test to see what he would ask for. He must ask for something reasonable that would not give away his intentions. He replied that, then, he would like to reclaim his short sword, a memento of his mother. The man interjected, memory? Then ordered the sword to be brought. Captain O tried to resist, but the man replied not to make him repeat himself twice. The Lord said that although it was old, it was still a good short sword. However, must pay for spilling the blood of their warriors. He expects that Seo Woon Wai's next swing of this sword will be deliberate. He lightly stabbed his finger, but for the sword to stab into the ground with such a ringing sound, the strength of his chi is terrifying. This was his warning to him. He may still be suspicious of him, but for now he's alive and that's what matters. The man asked how long he was going to sit there. Let him get up. He replied that he would, but could he take his sword first? He thought great, he managed to get the sword of Sodam back. The avatar started yelling about her hair. He thought that was normal? How would he fix it? The guy replied that he would take it to the blacksmith when he had a chance. If only she could move on her own, she'd pick at him with a few caresses. He'd look at that too. Is he really from a blood cult? She asked. Why didn't she know that? Seo Woon Wai replied that it wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth. He can tell her the truth. Avatar asked what he was going to say that made him so tense. Would she believe him if he said he was from the future? Master ordered to send someone to Woyang City to check on his maternal relatives. It was doubtful to him whether he was telling the truth or not. The way he watched every movement of his body, trying to figure out intentions, it was like the actions of a seasoned spy. Anyway, he knows too much about their cult. Let them be careful with him. The man said he understood. Avatar wanted to clarify something. He lived the life of a blood cult spy for 10 years, but he was killed, and when he woke up, he was there, right? Reborn 10 years before she died. And after being reborn, she was able to talk to him. She said she could see why he wasn't like the idiot she knew. That's what she thought of him. Anyway, he was really unlucky. After everything he'd been through, he was given the opportunity to live 10 years again, only to be kidnapped again by a blood cult. Everything would have gone smoothly if he had just abandoned Ah Song. He's the only one who's treated him humanly in his entire life. Besides, in his past life, Ah Song had died protecting him. It was a duty he kept in his heart while in the cult. Today he had finally managed to settle accounts with him. It didn't matter anymore. Now he had to worry about surviving. Sodam asked, is he going to be an errand boy again after being used for 10 years? Information is a weapon, so he's the best armed. He must know it better than anyone, because he was a spy. He already knows all the events that could affect him badly, so he can avoid them. Or he can turn things around for the better. He realized she was right. Why would he worry about survival if he had the knowledge from those 10 years? It's a good chance, just like she said. He must take the right chance. She replied that that was it. He couldn't live forever groveling to anyone. Soden said he shouldn't say it out loud, or it looked like he was talking to himself. His thoughts were getting ahead of his speech. He still has options. He might not be able to learn martial arts again. How is he going to deal with the destroyed Dantian? That's not very reliable information. But even if it was true, in the future, he decided to keep it in his mind for now. The Avatar said that if he could master Chi again, she could teach him martial arts. Seo Woon Wai asked, is she going to teach him martial arts? She replied that yes, it's a short sword technique that her previous master used, but she's the only one who knows it now. He interjected, learning martial arts using a sword? He didn't think it was possible. She asked, he had never heard the saying that even a dog can be taught to read poetry in 3 years. Let it happen, she's going to tell him the basics of martial arts now, so good. But then some blue fire appeared. He was suddenly like he was in space. He didn't know what was going on. The universe will open with the acquisition of the Sword of the Heart. It wasn't Sodem's voice. He came back, didn't realize what had just happened. Avatar asked where he lost his head. She was trying to be there. He asked if she could see it. Let him look closely. There are dots on his hand that look like stars. She started yelling, what the hell is a star? Is the short sword art technique not interesting to him? She took offense, said she wouldn't tell him anything else. He wouldn't look for her until they got there. She apologized to Sodam, but that would take about half a month. Seo Woon Wai sat there thinking, what is this? It looked like the blue fire he had seen during his rebirth. It might have something to do with the secret records of the immortal sword. It didn't reappear. What would he need to do to make it appear? Someone shouted that they were here. The door opened and sunlight streamed in, blinding him. The man shouted for them to get up and come out. Tell them to come out immediately and no tricks, or he'll kill them on the spot. Avatar asked why so loud. Where are they? The guy said the Valley of Blood. It's one of the blood cult's bases, as well as a training camp to train kidnapped children into blood cult warriors. And the man standing over there is the one in charge of training in the Valley of Blood. Commander Gu Sangwon, the blood tyrant. Someone yelled donkey from Luoyang. One of the twins said that he acted like he knew everything ahead of time, yet he was caught. It was Jae Baek and Woo Hyun. Seo Woon Wai replied that he hadn't seen them, so he thought they had escaped. The guy replied that he was happy to see a familiar face. One of the twins asked why he wasn't tied up. The guy replied that it was a long story. The guy said it's no big deal, let him put it out there. The man shouted for them to stop talking and listen carefully. He asked if they could see the podium behind him. When he counted to 5, they should run. Someone shouted to at least untie them before ordering them to run. He saw that Seo Woon Wai had already started to move forward. Is he really going to run? The guy replied that if they didn't want to die, let them do whatever he said. They didn't immediately realize what was going on. They asked him to explain. They did not hear any answer and concluded that it was better to run away. They started running without looking back, hearing that something was happening behind them. Once again, everything was just as Seo Woon Wai had said. The guy tells his brother that they should do whatever Woon Wai does. He doesn't know what's going on, but he thinks it will be okay if they follow him. Ja Baek said he'd never seen that happen before. The man marveled. The boy had bowed his head before he had been taught to do so. This must be the kid Captain O reported. The man said that's right, there was such a report. He's supposedly a descendant of a cultist. Did the Avatar say he knew what he had to do without being ordered to do it? He has to do it to avoid suspicion after calling himself a descendant. In addition, if he doesn't, they'll give him a show trial. Gu Sangwon that they were chosen. The will of the great blood demon led them to the great blood cult. One of the crowd started shouting that they shouldn't be fooled. It wasn't even their choice. The Avatar said he was right. How can you say that? There he is, the victim for exemplary punishment. She asked, by example, what does he mean? The guy replied that he did. They might not have noticed it because they were running away, but there was no place for weaklings in a blood cult. They went through this only to be killed later? They enforce loyalty through fear. It's very effective. The man asked, does he really want to end up like him? The Avatar asked how did he even survive such a thing in his past life? Seo Woon Wai said there was nothing to be proud of. He managed to survive by obeying like a dog. Now, they will begin the introduction ceremony. The man decided to start with him, the one in the front. Does he know what's inside that box? Seo Woon Wai replied that they were bloodworms. The man replied that he was well informed. Then why doesn't he explain to his comrades what a bloodworm is? The bloodworm is a parasite that is implanted in the chests of cult newcomers so that they never forget their allegiance. They must take the antidote every 24 hours, and if they don't, the bloodworm will run rampant inside them. Looking at him, the twin asked how he knew all this. The man replied that he did, as a descendant of the cult should. Ja Baek called him a bastard. Was he a spy for the blood cult? The Avatar said he was exposed. He was a real spy in his past life. Stop mocking him. Crashing in this mess is going to be painful. Gu Sangwon will propose to him. This is his chance to prove his kinship and loyalty to the cult. He gives him the honor of being the first to receive the bloodworm before all his comrades. It's impossible to avoid this parasite. But being the center of attention. And he has no choice. He'll survive, even if he has to swallow a bloodworm to do it. He said thank you for letting him be the first to be honored. The man thought that Commander Gu seemed to like him, although it was yet to be proven whether he was a real cultivator or not. He thinks the truth will come out soon anyway. All the preparations have been completed. Seo Woon Wai should just wait. Long live the blood demon, and to the glory of the blood cult. He said thank you for the chance. Now that is truly a spirit befitting a descendant who inherited the blood of their cult. The man asked if everyone had seen how it was done. Now each one of them comes up and takes a worm. Avatar asked how he lived for 10 years with that worm in his chest. To have that disgusting feeling again. She started asking what happened to Woon Wai. He said his chest hurts. No, it burns. It feels like it's burning from the inside out. She asked what was wrong with his chest. The pain feels different, but this is definitely where the parasite is. A bloodworm shouldn't rage for no reason, so why? Seo Woon Wai realized it was his doing, Captain O. He asked what was going on. Did the bloodworm in his chest rage? For a person claiming to be a descendant of a cultist to suffer so much during this sacred ritual. The guy mentally called him a scumbag. What did he do to the bloody worm in his body? The man asked the captain what's going on. Is the kid okay? He must have awakened the worm while he was swallowing it. Seo Woon Wai couldn't make a mistake. After all, this was his first bloodworm. Captain O ordered him to turn around. He would make the bloodworm fall asleep with a simple chi technique. He asked, would the captain do it personally? Does he think she's doing it because she wants to? The other students are just waiting because of him. Have her turn around now. Seo Woon Wai wondered, didn't Captain O do this? The pain was moving to his lower abdomen. He asked me to wait, said it was okay, asked me to please step back. What's he talking about? Just let him look forward. He'll get an internal injury if he gets hit in the wrong place. Captain O ordered his lower abdomen to be strained. He felt the same feeling. This had to be it, he was sure of it, and asked that it not be. The guy just farted in his direction. Seo Woon Wai said he was completely fine. Sodam couldn't believe he had farted on him. The guy didn't realize how long she was going to make fun of him. The more she thought about it, the funnier it got. She was bored there and said thanks for. He replied that he understood, so let her stop. She feels awful in there. The avatar asked what was so terrible. Was it because he farted? The guy said it was because of the bloodworm. The pain is gone, the heaviness in my chest is gone. It was a refreshing feeling, sort of. Calling the guy a blood cult lowlife, Jabek asked where they were going now. The guy replied that he didn't know everything. Did he forget that he also swallowed a bloodworm to survive? How could he do that to his hometown friend? Did he want to stand out? How low? What is he talking about? What does he gain by standing out in a blood cult? Captain O shouted for everyone's attention. They will now begin the rank evaluation test. Have them not make a scene or go overboard. In his past life, another captain did it. Is this about what happened now? The captain said it was very simple and asked if they could see the caves behind him. He told me that every cave has an examiner from their cult. They just need them to evaluate their talents. When the test is over, they will get a high, this or that, depending on the results. Their cult is totally focused on ability. Let them look over there. They see a sash on him? A blue belt signifies a warrior of high rank in their cult. A high-ranking warrior recognized for their abilities and accomplishments will have a bloodworm extracted. Gain recognition, then they will be rewarded. People began to wonder if they would extract that parasite. All he has to do is become a high-ranking warrior. Seo Woon Wai realized that everyone had high hopes after his words. Few people realized that they were slowly turning into cultists. Captain O thought he said not to make a scene. He saw that it was the same whistle. Jabek asked what happened. Why is he covering his ears? The whistling was loud, but there was no need to react like that. And then everyone began to squirm violently. The avatar asked if he was okay, and what was wrong with everyone in general. Seo Woon Wai replied that whistling, bloody worm in his chest rages when it goes off. It's weird, he whistled, but why doesn't he feel anything? He's been telling them about high-ranking warriors, because that's what they're supposed to do. But how many of them think they can honestly make their way to him? At most, there would be 2 or 3 of them, and the rest would have to live with the bloodworm for the rest of their lives. One of the twins shouted that he would never live with it for the rest of his life. How long are they going to stay down? Let them get up, they seem to have come to their senses already. He's not 100% sure, but he doesn't think the bloodworm is in his chest. Could it be because he's covering his ears? Even if he covers his ears, he cannot stop the rampage of the bloodworm. If only he had his own dantian. He could have checked with his chi. Jabek said he's made up his mind. Since they swallowed the bloodworm, there's no way for them to escape, right? No matter how good the guy is, he excels in martial arts over a bastard without dantian like him. Gonna quickly rise to a high rank, extract the bloodworm, and take revenge. Seo Woon-wai didn't know what he was talking about. Only Captain O wanted to name someone as Ja Baek raised his hand and said that he would like to be the first to take this test. Avatar asked, is he offended because the guy didn't tell him earlier? Seo Woon-wai wondered because of that. The commander told him to pass. Turning around, he told Woon-wai that he didn't need his help. He was going to show him that he was better than him. Suddenly a fist comes flying at him right in the face. The commander said, is he deaf? Didn't he tell him not to act on his own? Let him stay in formation and act only under orders. He said that Seo Woon-wai of the Seo clan would be the first to participate in the rank evaluation test. He knew he'd figure something out, but he was becoming a real pain in his ass. The commander asked what was wrong. Did the proud cult descendant have a problem with that? Seo Woon-wai replied that there was no problem. He was just grateful for his attention. He realized that this life would not be easy. He ordered the others to line up. They would start in order. For him to take that test again, that's new. The Avatar said he doesn't even have a dantian. What kind of plaque did he get in his past life? He answered, low, of course. Low rankers are used as meat or for frivolous missions. There was a voice. Is he the same Seo Woon-wai from Luoyang? That voice, if he's not mistaken, is what he's cooked up. It looked younger than when he met it in a past life, but he was sure it was him. Avatar asked, does Seo Woon-wai know who it is? The guy replied that he does. He was a direct commander in a previous life. She asked him what troop he belonged to in his past life. The guy said Blood Wolves. Sodam asked if that meant that man was the captain of the Blood Wolves. He replied that yes, that was his name. He called him Changho. No, Sun Gu, the captain of the Blood Wolves. The man asked why he didn't answer. The man asked if he was the same Seo Woon-wai from Luoyang. The boy thought that Captain O had come up with a cunning plan, but what a shame. He managed to fool even the fourth blood star, whom he had never met before. Fooling someone he knew in a past life is nothing. The boy replied that yes, it was him. Turning to the squad captain, he said that he had heard a lot about him from the girl. The man said what an obvious lie. He said his grandfather was a warrior of the Blood Wolf Squad. There isn't a single warrior in the Blood Wolf Squad who fits his grandfather's description. Should he tell him who he really is? He must have a death wish. Seo Woon-wai said his grandfather served under his father. He had trained in the Blood Wolf Squad since its inception. He remembers the names of all the warriors who were under his father's command. The Avatar said he was caught in a lie. Can he do it alone? Have him get her out now. If he pulls him out now, the situation will only get worse. He needs to talk to him first. Avatar shouted to him from below. He felt like his body was about to burst. He didn't understand how anyone could ever be so fast. If Seo Woon-wai couldn't talk him down, then he definitely wouldn't be able to last long. His character remained as ruthless as ever. Avatar asked the guy if he was okay. The guy says he's fine. The blow wasn't that hard. Let him pull himself together, he's coming. He was suddenly dizzy, his consciousness blurred. Avatar saw that he seemed to have hit the back of his head hard. Let him defend himself and act on her command. A right jab to the neck. Let him block it now. Did he really almost die? When he turned around, he saw that the sword had flown too far away. Now let him talk. Who told the guy about him? Seo Woon-wai thought he had decided to question him after all. This was his chance. The guy asked, doesn't he want to find his little sister? But Sun Gu said he seems to have dug up a lot of information about him. But he doesn't seem to know that his sister died. He told the man that Sewa was alive. The day his father was killed, she was kidnapped. The corpse he saw, why did only her body burn? It's a fake, she's still alive. If he wants to know more about it, he offered the man a deal. He said to think the guy even knows her name. It looks like he's not bluffing. He decided to listen to what Seo Woon-wai had to say, and then he would decide whether he wanted to negotiate or not. He asked where Sewa was. The guy replied that the trade association had a blooming moon, but Sun Gu said this association belongs to the first blood star. Is behind his father's death. He's already figured it out. Seo Woon-wai replied that the one who wanted to ignite the thirst for revenge in his heart and control the Blood Wolf Squad, the first blood star, Jang Ryong. He was the one behind it. The man replied that it was absurd. The wounds on his father's body were definitely inflicted by people from Orthodox sections. The guy asked, did he see it? Weren't the people who found the sword wounds on his father's body the people from that same blooming moon and with their leader Ho Wool? Seo Woon Wai saw that he was hesitating. He has one more thing to do. His sister is in a branch of the Blossoming Moon Trade Association in Jihan County, Zhejiang Province. To confirm this, have him please send people he trusts there. The man didn't realize who he was? Seo Woon Wai asked. After this, he could consider that they had a deal, right? Let him help him the next time he needed help. But Sung Gu said that if what he told was not true, he would cut off his head wherever he was. Seo Woon Wai had already swallowed the parasite, so why would he lie? He told the captain that he hoped he would find his sister quickly. He still doesn't trust the guy completely. However, if what he said is true, regardless of the contract, he'll consider the guy a benefactor for life. The guy replied that he was really as generous as he had heard. That's why Seo Woon Wai could trust him and follow him in his past life. Looking in his hand, the guy saw a mid-rank plaque. The man said that he deserved it since he managed to block his attacks twice. It wasn't because of the treaty. But Sung Gu asked, the guy heard about him from his grandfather? The guy asked the question in response. He would believe it if he answered yes. A man can play along. What he's talking about, a man doesn't know if he's smart or just plain stupid. He never mentioned his grandfather's name, but when he demanded an answer from him, the boy told everything but the name. The man was right, he seemed to be on to him. But Sung Gu didn't know what exactly this guy was up to. But he would trust Seo Woon Wai for this day. Avatar said it was a relief. She thought he'd had a shitload of sleep since they'd left her. He replied that he was really lucky. The guy seemed strange to the man. Judging by the fact that he was able to stay calm even in such a situation, he seemed quite experienced. And that movement, even if he got lucky and blocked his first attack, he closed his eyes when he blocked his second attack. For a man who watches his opponent's actions, he's pretty slow. It's gonna sound corny, but it's like someone's helping him. It's like he's met him before. It's a crazy thought, of course, but he's not disgusted by him at all. Captain O shouted for everyone to move and line up according to their rank. Those with medium rank would go with him. Jabek couldn't believe it. A lowlife like him had gotten a mid-rank plaque? One of the twins asked. How did someone like him who doesn't have Dantian get a mid-rank plaque? Does he have some special privileges because he's from a blood cult? Just let him wait. He will surely defeat him in the next test. Avatar said Jabek likes to compete. They're coming at him from all sides. All sides, she thought? Come to think of it, so is Captain O. Since Woon Wai stayed fine even after meeting No Sung Gu, it seems he's getting on his nerves. He keeps looking back at him. Perhaps he's angry because he's lost his reason to pick on him. Thanks to the captain of the Blood Wolf squad confirming he belongs. The man said he was definitely a descendant of the cult, but Captain O couldn't believe it. The Avatar asked what he was going to do next. First, he needed to find a way to restore his Dantian. He had talked about it before, but how was he going to do it? The boy replied that he had his own ways. Had she heard of a divine healer who had the gift of healing any ailment? Avatar didn't know who it was. Seo Woon Wai told him that he was a doctor known for being able to cure anything. He would cure him if he paid the price. Based on what he heard, he was also able to heal someone's Dantian. In 10 days to that valley, a divine healer will come to that valley. The Avatar asked, then he would just have to pay for the treatment. But he didn't leave all his money at the inn, did he? The only thing he has is her. Is he going to sell her in exchange for a cure? The boy said of course not. Jabek didn't understand what that jerk was doing again. Seo Woon Wai was going to find some medicinal plant and use it as payment. The Avatar asked again, a plant? He replied that yes, in 10 days the divine healer would ask for a certain herb. She said he was doing great. Given the circumstances, he should be very successful in the blood cult. Avatar said he's from an Orthodox sect, but he's thinking of succeeding in a blood cult. The guy replied that it's pretty much the same everywhere else. There are rotten bastards in both Orthodox and unorthodox sections. Captain O ordered everyone to stop. He didn't understand what had happened there, and who had done all this. A huge man stood in front of him, holding one of the guys in his arms. He said they were no good. The captain asked who the hell was he? Turning around, the man said the new assholes had arrived. Commander O ordered everyone to stand back. The commander didn't even have time to draw his sword before the man hit him, and he flew off to the side, with the man saying that he was in his way. Watching this, Seo Woon-wai realized that he had just taken out the commander with one punch. That's really ridiculous. He didn't understand how the captain, who was a first-class martial artist, was struck down with a single blow. Then the commander wouldn't be able to resist him either. He had not heard of such a powerful martial artist in his past life. What incredible pressure! Seo Woon-wai didn't realize who he was. Jabek asked, "Did he kill the captain?" Seo Woon-wai mentally said that he wasn't dead, so he better not do anything stupid. All he did was clap his hands, but the pressure of the wind was so great. As soon as the sound reached their ears, they all immediately began to fall to the floor. The man asked, "Why the shouting? Aren't all these underdogs also worthless?" The Avatar asked Seo Woon-wai if he was okay, and if he could even hear her. His eardrums. It feels like they've been ruptured. He can't hear anything around him. He felt dizzy, like he was going to throw up. Was that warm feeling in his chest again? The Avatar interjected, "Hot in her chest?" It was the same with the blood parasite. The boy replied that it felt different. The ringing in his ears stopped, and his wounds recovered. Jabek shouted that he would not let him try. He wouldn't let him lay a finger on his little brother. Seo Woon-wai thought to himself that the guy's boyfriend had endured that clap. It would have been better if he had just stayed lying down. Laughing, the man said he was through. And then a moment later he hit him with such force that the guy left marks on the ground after him. Sudam asked Seo Woon-wai if he could move. The guy replied that yes, if he lingers there, he doesn't know what might happen to him. Turning around, the man said, "One more?" The Avatar shouted that he had seen him, so it was time to run. In an instant, the man was next to Seo Woon-wai. The guy didn't even have time to run away before he received a blow to the head and his eyes went dark. The commander tried to bring Captain O. He arrived there to look for them as they did not show up at the appointed time. He said that most of the cadets had severe wounds. He asked what happened there. Captain O apologized and said that some barbarian had appeared. The commander asked if it was an outsider. He replied that yes, he was ashamed to admit it, but he was strong enough to knock him out with one punch. His appearance, he had uncombed hair and a huge body. And on top of that he sported a tiger skin. He said it was a huge man in tiger skin? Captain O replied that yes, that was correct. He saw that the commander was thinking and asked what was wrong. The commander thinks this is the man who hit him and kidnapped the children. Commander O asked, "By that person he means, are you Heiken, one of the 4 Supreme Elders?" The commander said yes. He might not have known because he was on a mission. But until recently, he lived in the Valley of the 6 Bloods. He is one of the 4 honorable blood cultists. Among the 4 of them, he has the most eccentric personality. Heiken said it was very unexpected. To think of a cadet having a short sword even if it's worn out. The man couldn't believe that some brat with a destroyed dantian was able to withstand this attack. And he is the first one to wake up. Looks like things are about to get very interesting. Captain O once again apologized to the commander. It was because of his carelessness. He replied that the Supreme Elder was not someone he could do anything about. Just don't tell him, he didn't kill those guys, did he? They're mid-ranking cadets who are extremely hard to find. He wasn't sure about Seo Woon-wai, but the twins, they could very well be high-ranking. The commander replied that he had no idea what would happen to them. The commander knew that the crazy man came there from time to time, but he didn't expect the man to mess around with the cadets. They had almost reached his abode. He told Captain O to be careful how he spoke to the High Elder. Even among the 4 Supreme Elders, he is the most eccentric and the hardest to deal with. After bowing, the commander said that everyone was subject to the blood demon. Let blood rule the world. Turning to the Supreme Elder, Commander Gu Sangwon introduced himself and said that he was in charge of the cadets of the 6th Blood Valley. Captain O asked the commander if he should come in and take a look. The man replied that he should wait, not to be disturbed. The man thinks he's pretty good for a commander. Gu Sangwon replied that he is not worthy of such praise. He is just an insect to a creature like a Supreme Elder. Heiken asked the reason why they were there. Was it because of those children? The commander replied that it was because they were going to raise them to be warriors of their cult. The elder asked if they were afraid he would hurt them. These kids seemed pretty good to him. He's thinking of teaching them a few tricks while they're in there with him, so let them not worry about them. The commander wondered, is Elder He going to train them personally? After all, he had never taken disciples before. The commander replied to the head elder that he understood. He did not know he had such intentions, and congratulated him for accepting the disciples. The man asked not to be misled. He's just using them to brighten his loneliness. He thinks the elder is taking apprentices? The commander apologized for his ignorance. Captain O couldn't understand what he was talking about. Wasn't he taking them on as apprentices? But learning from a powerful martial arts master can already change your entire life. And this teacher, one of 4 subordinates, Captain O decided he wouldn't give Seo Woon Wai that opportunity. The man would like to say something to the Supreme Elder. He began to say that one of the cadets he had taken, a cadet named Seo Woon Wai, had a damaged dantian. The commander asked what the captain was trying to say. Just when Captain O said that he wasn't worthy to be trained by him, the elder immediately threw something at him, and he flew down. The Supreme Elder asked him why he was giving his opinion when he chose to teach him himself. He wasn't in the mood to listen to them talk, so let them go. They can't do anything there. Although it's a shame to lose twins with such potential. He thinks they could use Seo Woon Wai to send him as a spy to the Martial Arts Alliance. The elder said how noisy they were. The boy realized, the man who had killed black and white demons in his past life. There was one of the 4 high priests, Heiakan. But why did he bring him there too? The man replied that he was hungry after a long conversation. Looking at Seo Woon Wai, he told the guy to bring him food within 4 hours. He didn't realize what kind of nonsense was that. He brought him there to have the guy bring him food. He warns him in advance, let him not even think of running away. If he is caught running away, let him prepare for the worst. Does he really think that Seo Woon Wai won't run away just because he told him to? He thought he'd play along, wait for the right moment, and run away. Turning to the master, the boy told him that he didn't know any martial arts. In addition, without weapons, it would be difficult for him to get food, and that short sword he's holding in his hand is a memento from his mother. And then the sword hits him in the forehead. The man says he's very cunning, let him take it. He doesn't need a lousy sword like that, much less a short one. The avatar started screaming that the damn barbarian was using her to touch the dirtiest places. He even used her to pick his teeth. He said there was one thing, but how long would these 2 sleep? Seo Woon Wai thought they would die at that rate. Oh, and one more thing I almost forgot. The elder said he wants meat. When he comes back, have him bring it, he won't forget. The guy didn't realize what just happened. Where did he go? It was also very windy. Seo Woon Wai looked around and didn't realize where he had just gotten to. He still wants the guy to bring him 4 hours worth of food? He's only got 4 hours to get down from this place, so where would he get meat in a place like this? The avatar told him to look to the side. They saw Heiakan jumping. Sodam asked, how would a guy be able to run away from someone like him? Seo Woon Wai had completely lost all motivation to do so. He tried to pull himself together. If he gave in, he'd be a slave to this asshole. One way or another, if it came to that, he'd do what he could. Seo Woon Wai thought about how scary it was. How could he escape from there? First he had to go down. Before he could even think about it, he was flying down. He was on the verge of death. If only he had his own dantian. Why was his life so hard, even though it was his second? The avatar decided to play a joke, and said that he came down pretty fast. Seo Woon Wai asked, how far down did he go? Heiakan said that 4 hours have already passed. He can't believe the guy is still chilling there. Apparently, he didn't heed his warning. So he prepared to die. The boy said he missed his master. The man didn't know what the hell that was about. Seeing Seo Woon Wai hunting, Sudam said that he was already doing well. The boy replied that he was used to it since he had been living like this for 2 months. The first time he was beaten out of it, it was because he was wasting space on his descent. Avatar said that in those moments, she thought he'd be beaten to death. He had to turn himself in at some point. Especially after he was beaten while trying to escape. He said it was a long time ago. The avatar said it looked like the day was going to go well. The boy said yes if he caught a couple more. Hearing that the Supreme Elder had come, Seo Woon Wai greeted him and said that he was early today. The boy was about to return. Heiken asked if the guy had already gotten food. His stomach is completely empty. Seo Woon-wai said there would be fried rabbit for dinner. The man decided to see how many there were. He asked, only 2, there are 4 of them, and there are only 2 rabbits? He guesses they need to reduce the number of mouths to feed. Looks like today's not his day either. Not surprising at all. It's so exhausting. The guy had no idea what was in his head. He was sure he had his reasons. For the past few months he has been living like a slave. Every single day he climbed a cliff where he could have fallen to his death if he had stumbled even a little. He searched the woods thoroughly for food. If he found food, he got punched in the face. If he didn't find it, he got punched in the face even harder. And if he passes out from the beating, they tie him to a tree. The Avatar asked, didn't he make such a fuss when he was first hanged there? He's doing without it now, as he's used to both the beatings and the things that bind him. Jabek asked the kid, has he still not learned how to get food? They are getting beaten up because of him. Sudam said that even Jabek is in a terrible state after 1 month. But they would have been beaten up even if Seo Woon-wai wasn't there. Guy added that the Supreme Elder is looking for him, let him come back. He called it in much earlier than usual. Yeah, the guy is scared to think what he'll do to him again. Standing in front of the man, he ordered the boy to take off his clothes. It was very sudden. He didn't understand why he had to do that. Heiken asked, it's been 2 months, hasn't it? The man said he was already ready. The guy didn't know what he was talking about. The Avatar told him that his body was much better after climbing the rock, hunting, and hanging from the tree. The elder shouted to Jabek that it was now his responsibility to get food. Before he could say that it was Seo Woon-wai's job, he was kicked in the face. He told them he'd be back soon, so have them prepare everything properly. Looking at Wu Hyun, Sudam noticed that he seemed to be going bald. Grabbing the boy, the Supreme Elder jumped out of his house. He didn't expect this, so he shouted out, can't they walk? The man told him to cut the crap. He's the one going through all this shit in the first place, because he's incapable of using even basic movement techniques. Seo Woon-wai asked why he was doing this. The man replied that they were on their way to see the man who would be his mentor. Does he think it's right to meet him in such a pathetic way? Avatar said he didn't seem to know who was the dirtiest one there. Heiken shouted that enough swimming, let him get out of the water. Seo Woon-wai said he didn't have time to wash properly. Now Sodam can see why he smells like a homeless person. She couldn't believe there was such a place behind the waterfall. Did anyone live there? The boy replied that he thought the mentor was the kind of person who didn't want to be disturbed by others. It could be a strong and handsome art master. Something about him is very doubtful. But assuming this old man has a friend who he can turn to for help in accepting a student. He doubts that the man has his head on straight. Heiken said they're at the location. Why is he standing there? Let him quickly pay his respects. From now on, this man will be his mentor. Kneeling down, Seo Woon-wai began to say praise to the blood demon, and long live the blood cult. He shows the middle rank of Seo Woon-wai, paying his respects to his mentor. The Avatar said she didn't think the man was capable of answering him. Looking in his direction, the guy saw a skeleton there. She thinks his mentor died a long time ago. Was he really talking about that skeleton? The boy asked the High Elder, was he playing a joke on him? Laughing, he asked, did he have nothing else to do? Didn't he notice anything? The changes that had happened to him in 2 months. He got stronger when he climbed the rock. He became faster and tougher when he hunted. He became stronger when the elder beat him. He also became stronger in spirit, and even the fact that he was hanging from a tree was training his body and energy core. Everything up to this point had been about building a foundation of physical strength so that he could learn martial arts. He apologized to the Supreme Elder for saying this, but he had lost his energy core as a child. Did he think the Elder had trained him without knowing about this affliction? What would he have done if Heiken had told him that there was a way to control internal energy without an energy core? He clearly didn't expect to hear those words. The man asked, does he know what essence is? It's something he learns as soon as he starts studying martial arts. As the name suggests, it is required for all martial arts, and the essence is also known as the energy core. When a person is trained in martial arts, they either use the technique of energy circulation, either an energy cultivation technique to refine one's energy, which is known as internal energy when it accumulates in his energy core. But since his energy core is destroyed, he won't be able to use his essence. The boy didn't understand why he was saying what all masters of the arts knew. The man said that in the end there are only two things left, energy and the physical body. Does he even know what energy is? He's not comfortable with it. Let him not tell him what he means about controlling the inner energy. Seo Woon-wai said, he is the one talking about the origin energy. He only knows a part of it. The energy of origin is not wrong. Heian revealed that the real name of this thing that sits right in the center of his chest is something else. The innate energy of the core. It is exactly what one is born with, and it cannot be accumulated. It is believed to be twice as powerful as the internal energy that is accumulated through its energy core. In that sense, he is fortunate, because the words written there teach them to control their innate core energy. The Avatar said it looks like he hit the jackpot. With that, he'll be able to train in martial arts. But why doesn't he look happy? Is he really going to miss out on such a valuable opportunity? Guy replied to Sodam that innate core energy, as the name implied, was a life energy that equaled life. Only in one situation does a martial artist utilize his innate core energy, and that is when he tries to die with his enemy. The innate core energy can't be restored. If he continues to use it, he won't be able to live for long. Damn, old man, does he really think the guy would be happy and glad to take this chance? There's no way he's gonna do that. Bowing, he thanked the Supreme Elder for teaching him such a useful thing. However, there was something he couldn't understand with his stupid mind. He lost his energy core after experiencing an energy deviation due to lack of ability during his martial arts training. People told him he was talentless the whole time he was in his clan. May he please reconsider teaching the guy that? Sodam said his face doesn't change a bit when he lies. He went through all this trouble to help him train his body, but he was talentless. Seo Woon-wai thought it worked. Heian thinks the guy knows a thing or two about martial arts since he's from the martial So clan. Thinks the man doesn't realize that he's trying to avoid learning it because he knows it will absorb his origin energy. Grabbing him by the throat and lifting him off the ground, the elder told him that he was really the one who was bad at speaking the language. He needed to help the boy realize that he had to do it right. He knows that if he can't learn it, he will be useless to him, right? The elder will let him make his choice. Does he want his neck snapped here and now? Or does he want to learn it and die slowly? The Avatar asked him to say yes. But if he does, everything goes according to his plan. Seo Woon-wai shouted that it was better to let him kill him then. The elder asked, does he not care about his life? Does he think anyone will blame him for killing him? The elder said, with what confidence would a guy with a shattered energy core who would never become anything more than a third-rate martial artist begging to die? He needs to build up his courage. After all, he doesn't just want to be a third-rate spy, he needs to do this. He asks if the elder is going to kill him. He realizes that sometimes it's better to risk his life. He's afraid, but if he lives like this, it will be just like the man says. He'll just be used for the rest of his life until he just dies. Seo Woon-wai said that since he already had the parasite in him, he would rather die now than live like this. The elder couldn't believe that he was still trying to lie to him in this situation. Seo Woon-wai asked, what does he mean by that? The guy thinks that the elder didn't check the condition of his body? He knew it from the moment he decided to take him along. It would be better for him if he didn't pull any tricks from now on. If he knew that, why didn't they do anything? The elder didn't care about things like parasites. There was something else that was more important to him. Now the boy understood what it was. If he had wanted to kill him from the beginning, he would have done so when he found out he no longer had the parasite in his bloodstream. He definitely wanted something from him. And though he doesn't know what it is, it has to do with what he taught him. Heian decided to make him an offer that would interest him. As payment for doing what he told him to do, the elder would turn a blind eye to the fact that he wouldn't have a parasite in his blood. Nothing complicated, just after he learns it, just has to fight the twins he will be training in martial arts. Avatar assumed that if he had said that from the beginning, they would have worked with him before. The guy asked, work with him? She said that's interesting, isn't it? Seo Woon-wai understands, but why? Just because he's given him free rein, doesn't dare ask him unnecessary questions. The elder finally got a few words into his head. He believes he will follow his instructions. First, Have him start by feeling the innate energy of the core. If he can sense her, then let her come back to him. If he gets caught doing anything, it won't just end in broken legs. Let him remember that. Sodam said it's just his intuition, but she thinks this old man likes him. Seo Woon-wai asked her not to say such terrible things. He has no intention of getting close to such a crazy old man. He needs to look at the intricacies of this martial art first, as he will need them to learn it. He will use it if he needs to, but more important is whether or not he can learn it. If one could learn cultivation techniques or martial arts just by watching a manual, why would anyone need a master? Besides having tons of guys, he's also not stupid. What a shame if those words would have been a great experience for them. Of course, if it wasn't, he'd be looking for someone else more suitable. Because even though it uses up the innate energy of the core, it's a martial art. It's a secret technique that all martial artists would want to know about. If he taught it fully, he could prevent it from consuming its innate core energy. The Avatar didn't understand what that meant. There's no chance of him dying because his innate core energy has been depleted. Sodam was already excited that it was indeed a jackpot. Let him not celebrate yet, he wasn't done reading yet. Seo Woon-wai said he'll look into it. You have to use the destruction of internal energy to destroy your core. Locate the power source, and lastly. The Avatar saw that last part missing. It was that last part that was supposed to teach him how to maintain his innate core energy. He should have at least written it down. The guy was disappointed that the skeleton died before he finished. Seo Woon-wai thought that from what the old man had just said. He realized that the old man knew it wasn't finished. What does he want the guy to do with incomplete instructions? The Avatar asks why he's so nervous? How would she know all that? The guy asked what she was talking about. She replied that she was talking to that creature. He had a flash of rage when he called it a skeleton. Looking at her, Seo Woon-wai asked Sudam, can she talk to a skeleton? Calling him an idiot, she said she wasn't talking to a skeleton, but to a sword. It's an iron sword. If you think about it that way, why doesn't he talk to it himself? Seo Woon-wai didn't immediately realize, is she talking about this iron sword? Could she talk to it, just like a human being? Sodam called him Brovan. They with iron sword don't talk like humans. He is a special person who can hear the voice of the swords. Now he understood what the sword mind meant in the secret record of the immortal sword. In martial arts secrets, the instructions are usually vague, which is why this was described as the mind of the sword. It was literally the voice of swords. What powers it would gain after all the other abilities were revealed. The Avatar yelled enough. Let her stop daydreaming and talk to that sword already. She thinks the sword is amazed that he can hear them too. As soon as Seo Woon-wai touched the sword, the guy said that he hadn't felt human touch in a long time. The guy turned off to the side. He's Woon-wai, right? He can really hear his voice. He asked for permission to introduce himself. He is the Iron Then Southern Sky. This name was given to him by his teacher who passed away, the swordsman of the Southern Sky, Ho John Day. He asked why the guy was so surprised. Seo Woon-wai replied that of course he was surprised. The Southern Sky swordsman was famous for turning the entire Yunnan province upside down with one sword. If he hadn't suddenly disappeared, he would be one of the top martial artists of the Central Plain right now. There were even rumors that he might have become the 9th best martial artist of the Central Plain. Seo Woon-wai didn't understand how a man like him ended up on a nameless mountain peak in Guangdong province and died like that. Was it really that crazy Heiakan? The guy replied that no, it was someone else. Heiakan had never defeated his master. He wondered, one of the 4 supreme blood cult elders, Heiakan, couldn't defeat the Southern Sky swordsman? But who could kill such a great martial artist? Who even Heiakan himself couldn't defeat? He'll tell him about it later. Doesn't he have more important things to do right now? He knows what's going on since she heard them. He needs to learn the technique of cultivating inner energy, and fight the Heiakan twins. He'll know it if he sees it. The guy replied that he knows and will teach him the technique. Sodam said to wait, can one agree so quickly? It concerns the honor of his master, the swordsman of the Southern Sky. If he loses because he didn't learn his master's martial arts properly, his master's honor will be tarnished, and he hopes that his master's martial arts can be passed on to the next generation. That is his wish. Before he could thank him, the guy interrupted and said they had something to discuss. He asked Seo Woon-wai to be his new master. His master's honor is very important, but since he's a sword, it's more important for him not to lose the purpose of his existence. He's been very lonely all this time. So he wants the boy to be his new master. To touch the sheath of his sword every day. Sodam was clearly not happy about the offer. Seo Woon-wai replied that he would like to be his new master. But if he acts like a pervert, or would ask him to touch him, then he would simply refuse to learn the refinement technique. The guy said, "What a pity, that is fine." Seo Woon-wai said that they would start learning the technique right away. The place that people usually call core energy is the essence below the stomach. The lower core energy and the innate core energy are in different areas. He should feel the innate core energy with his chest. His previous master called this part of the chest the central energy core. Seo Woon-wai heard this for the first time. He asked, "If there is a lower and central energy core, there must also be a higher energy core?" He said that above the middle of the forehead is the upper energy core. It is believed to be the place of awakening of consciousness. It is important for him now to feel the innate core energy within the central energy core. There is nothing complicated about it. He just needs to feel the innate energy of life. Seo Woon-wai asked how he could feel the energy of life. He replied that if it was difficult for him to feel it, he could do it faster with his 5 senses. The guy asked again, "Using his 5 senses?" Sword of the Southern Sky replied that it was easiest to spot in extreme situations or when life was in danger. If he feels a sudden surge of strength, and a warmth that emanates from his chest. This is the feeling of the innate energy of the core. He wasn't just training his body, he was trying to help him learn what it was like to feel the innate energy of the core. Sudam said that's probably not it. Seo Woon-wai said that he is really mysterious. He doesn't know what happened to the guy, but it sounds like he has felt the sensation of innate core energy before. The boy replied that yes, he had probably felt it before. In that case, let him try to remember the feeling. The situation, emotions and sensations he felt at that moment. Let him remember the moments when his will to live was strongest. He began to remember all the moments when he almost lost his life. "Is that the innate energy?" he asked. That blob of hot energy, it seemed a little familiar to him. Sodam asked, "Hadn't he said something like that before? When he swallowed the parasite and when his eardrums burst, wasn't his chest hot?" The guy said it was amazing. His past master had been trying hard for months just to feel his innate core energy. He's really amazing to be able to do it in 4 hours. Seo Woon-wai asked, "It took the highly ranked martial arts master, the swordsman of the Southern Sky, a few months?" She thinks he can feel it better since he died and came back to life. The guy asked, "Died and came back to life? That's an impressive metaphor." Sodam replied that he had indeed died and come back to life. Have him try to focus on the innate core energy. He will feel a small burst of innate core energy, about the size of a fingernail, in the central energy core. If he can't feel it, that's okay. If he mastered the technique of cultivating innate energy, he would be able to enlarge this essence. Seo Woon-wai said he wasn't talking about that. He was sure it was the size of 2 fingers. He said it was impossible and very strange. Using the accumulation gate, he would be able to conduct the core energy through the meridian near the heart, and control the innate core energy. Have him try to hit a rock in this state. It looks very difficult. Sodam said it would be okay even if his hand was crushed, because the innate core energy would repair it. The guy replied that there is no guarantee that it will happen, but there is still a possibility of it happening. Seo Woon-wai said that they say it so easily because it's not their fist. What if he can't live up to their expectations? It's already enough for him to be able to master martial arts again. Well, he decided to see how strong he was. They hadn't expected it. It was surprising. Was this the power that the innate core energy was endowed with? The guy had never seen this before. Even if his previous master's innate core energy was great, but not as great as this guy's. With this amount of innate core energy, he could learn the secret arts related to cultivation techniques 10 years faster than normal. It was as if he had been on the verge of life and death almost every day for the past 10 years. The guy asked, "Will Seo Woon-wai really be reborn? He's awake, isn't he? This is much better than he imagined. Is this really the power he has?" Calling him a lowlife, Hayakan asked, "Did he dare to try to escape?" The boy replied that it was a misunderstanding. Even if he had been climbing steep cliffs for 2 months, How could a person who didn't master the art of movement be able to return in time? Then he should have moved faster, shouldn't he? Well, of course he would have come back faster if he'd moved a day earlier. Hey Akshan asked, did he feel innately inward? Why is he silent? The elder asked if he felt that energy. Not only did Seo Woon why not feel his innate core energy, he didn't feel anything at all. The elder said he thought it wasn't something he could feel in a day. Sudam asked the guy why he didn't tell him the truth. Seo Woon why replied that it was dangerous to reveal all his abilities in Mirema, and he had just marveled at it. As the Sword of the Southern Sky said, it was impossible to know about another's innate energy until he intentionally tried to feel it. Hayakan said that he almost succeeded in tricking him. Looks like he's trying to avoid using his core energy to prolong his life. Guess he needs to explain well to the guy that he should take it seriously. As it was, if he lost the fight, the elder would hand him over to Captain O. After bringing him here, the man had come several times already. He didn't really get into what Captain O was saying, but the man seems to want him back. The stubborn bastard is still following him. The twins told him he had his eye on him. If the elder informs him that there is no parasite in his body, he will be a low-ranking warrior for the rest of his life. Seo Woon Wai asked the master, isn't that different from what he had offered him? The elder replied that he had tried various tricks before to avoid fighting as he should, at full strength. Doesn't he now feel motivated to learn how to feel his innate inner energy? So that's how he wants it. Seo Woon Wai has something for him too. I mean, he said he'd kill him if the kid lost. What if he wins? Isn't there a reward for winning? Hayakan said that he was as bold as ever. If he needs something for motivation, he will fulfill one of his requests. But only if he wins. Have him read this and familiarize himself, as he will study these martial arts in the future. This is the art of wielding the light chakram. Seo Woon Wai wondered how he would fight if he only knew cultivation techniques. Apparently that's how he would fight. Although he can't learn the energy circulation technique that the skeleton used, the light chakram art is a fairly balanced energy circulation technique. He can learn most martial arts without much trouble. Twins have always been taught this, so they shouldn't complain about the unfairness of it. He's actually trying to make them fight and even fight as much as possible. Taking out a book called Shining Star Sword Technique, the elder said that this book belonged to that skeleton. So it was the same technique that he himself had used. It meant that it was the sword technique of a Southern Sky swordsman. Sodam said that it was strange. How could he have secret records of the Southern Sky swordsman's martial arts? Now that the Avatar mentioned it, Seo Woon Wai realized the elder was what, searching the corpse? Hayakan asked what is the sour face, is he not happy? The guy said it was because he had a question. How did he get these secret martial arts records? The elder said someone gave it to him. The boy shouted that it was a lie. He didn't understand who stole it. He assumed the thief was Hayakan. He was trying to use the Shining Star Sword technique to defeat his previous master in a duel with him. Sodam said that it looked like that old man really wanted to win. Did Hayakan say he would show him how to use this technique? Yes, he said he would show him for 3 days starting tomorrow. If he was going to show it to him, then he had completely learned the sword technique. He must have used a move from it to supplement his own martial art, and the twins would most likely appear in the fight after learning an advanced martial art. The guy thought he'd suddenly decided to make it a straight fight, but apparently he didn't. But I guess there's nothing you can do about it. Sodam said he was really weird. How does the fact that he lost to the Southern Sky swordsman change from that? Seo Woon Wai replied, not that he was normal before. The guy revealed that it was because his former master, the Southern Sky swordsman, had died. The Southern Sky swordsman had spent countless with Yakan, but they never managed to settle the score once and for all. Now that his previous master is dead, there's no way to find out which one is better, so he tries to win this way. Avatar asked, hadn't he said that Hayakan hadn't been able to defeat the Southern Sky swordsman even once when they first met? He meant that they had drawn the fight to a draw. Whatever happens, this matter can only be resolved when he loses? While there's still time, he should think about what to do. He loses his sword during the fight, then uses the 8 lightning short sword technique to defeat them. If he uses a short sword, Hayakan is likely to say that it's not according to the rules. The guy told Seo Woon Wai not to worry. The Shining Star Sword technique he stole. It's not a technique refined by its previous master. After his former master lost his secret records, he continued to refine his sword technique. Each of the existing sword techniques had a few weaknesses. While the old and new techniques were absolutely identical, the movements of each technique had been improved. And so the theme was improved. Now he understood what the guy meant by the advanced version. Although it was similar to the sword technique described in the secret records, there was definitely a difference. If he hadn't stolen those records, his previous owner wouldn't have thought to improve them. Thinks it was a blessing of sorts. Sodam apologized for spoiling the atmosphere. But wouldn't the elder be shocked if he used the improved sword technique? He probably asked him why he didn't do as the elder said. The guy said that it was true. Someone who had barely learned sword technique would have a hard time improving it. After all, perfecting sword technique is something that is only possible for someone like his previous master who had a talent for sword wielding. If Xiao Wung loses, he will remain a low-ranked warrior for the rest of his life. And if he wins, he'll be questioned. But he will definitely lose if he doesn't use the improved sword technique. Xiao Wunwei knows, so he must use it. The avatar asked what he thought he was going to do. The boy replied that he had his ways. They wondered if everything would really be okay. Sudam asked why the two of them were talking. Xiao Wunwei replied that it doesn't matter now. No one would fall for the same trick twice. He just needs to take advantage of it. Captain O said he'd deal with him. He doesn't understand how the guy got so lucky and fell under Elder Akshan's command. But now that the man had brought someone who could replace him, he couldn't leave. He ordered Dohyun, when he meets him, to show him the abilities of a warrior of the highest rank. Let him deal with him. Taking off his mask, Captain O stood beside the man and said that he would definitely deal with Xiao Wunwei this time, not understanding how he had fallen into Elder Khan's submission. But now that he had brought someone who could replace the cadet, the latter would not be able to get away from him. Ordering the hero standing beside him to show the abilities of a true top-ranked warrior. Returning from training, Wunwei was called by Captain O and Dohen, who had found him. The young man greeted them affably, introducing himself as a middle-ranked warrior and paying his respects to Captain O, which he did not get from his old acquaintances, who only said that he seemed to be succeeding as a slave of the elder. Iron Sword asked the hero if this was the captain he had spoken of earlier. Placing his hand on the cadet's shoulder, green vapors came out from under it, which said that he was using internal chi energy to test the cadet's skills and progress. The captain retracted his hand and said that he had assumed that there was something special about the young man since the Supreme Elder had chosen him, even though Dantian was destroyed as before. But even though the cunning old man used chi energy, he was unable to detect the internal energy. Pointing at his ambassador, the shaggy-haired man said that he would serve the Supreme Elder in his stead. After all, a warrior of the highest rank is capable of carrying out the Supreme Elder's errands much better than some scum of Dantian's base, and he couldn't still understand how he managed to convince the captain of the Blood Wolf Squad. But no one had even heard of the hero's grandfather in Luoyang City. So he would follow him to the valley for further clarification. The young man became very wary and angry seeing that his enemy was really persistent, and if he practiced martial arts so persistently, he would be very successful. Without showing his sincere emotions, the great actor of Luoyang City folded his arms and replied that it was a misunderstanding and his grandfather had to keep the fact that he was from the Blood Wolf Squad a secret, and who would he reveal his secret to other than his own family? And as for a top-ranked warrior, the Supreme Elder was unlikely to accept him. Such words from the lips of what was said of him, a lowlife, made the man madly angry, and he said that this time he would take the opportunity to teach him a lesson, that he should not be so presumptuous, and tell his pawn to teach the insolent man a lesson, and he in turn would take charge in case of anything. The bulky man who approached the hero scratched the back of his head and said that he had nothing against that, but he could not miss such a good opportunity, so let him just bear with it, even if it hurts. It was funny to the young man to hear such speeches from self-confident stupid thugs. But no matter how strong and fast this warrior was, the young man was able to easily dodge without allowing a scratch. Such movements even seemed slow to him. The warrior used one of the basic techniques of the blood cult, 8 bloody fists, which was expected from a top-ranked fighter whose speed and movements were close to ideal but not enough, and after all, the hero had only learned the second stage of the Shining Star Sword technique. but he could not have imagined that the abilities would be enough to withstand the attacks of a top-ranked warrior. From behind the scuffle came the furious voice of Akshan, who had appeared out of nowhere, and the uninvited guests stuttered with fright. Without understanding who these people were, and why they came, the elder put his huge paw on Do-hen's head and pressed sharply, breaking all the vertebrae and pressing the neck into the body. Fountains of blood spurted out from under his clothes. The hero only had to stare at everything amazed. In a terrifying voice Akan asked who the daredevil was, crying out in pain and fear. Captain O said he was a servant under Commander Gu Sangwon, and approaching the face of the intruder, added how some ordinary captain dared to rampage in his territory. Jabek began a dialogue with the hero, saying that he had heard that he had begun to learn sword techniques and asked about his progress, because apparently he was doing quite well if he was in such good shape. Behind the older brother stood the younger brother, almost completely bald from hard training and stress. Looking at the brothers, the hero also noticed that after such a long time they had clearly gotten stronger, so much so that their training was harsh. Jabek was horrified when he saw the corpse lying nearby and heard the former commander-in-chief begging for mercy, shouting that nothing was known about Seo Woon Wai and asking for it to be dealt with. Captain O received an unsparing fist punch from the elder, his mouth bleeding due to his teeth being knocked out, and he passed out. Akan warned him that he wasn't interested in the hero's past and told him to keep his stories to himself. But he boldly brought someone else with him and dared to attack his students. Turning and addressing his student, he said that he had clearly hurt and troubled the idiot who was lying down, since he had even found a replacement for him and dared to poke around in someone else's territory. The hero admitted that when he was kidnapped he had killed 2 of Captain O's subordinates, which surprised the brothers, and the elder replied that since he was able to kill his subordinates without even having a dantian, they were just as worthless idiots as their boss, because weaklings die first. That's the law of nature. Akan ordered his brothers to lower the bodies down the cliff and leave them somewhere, and after a couple of silly questions, they set to work immediately. The elder, with his trademark smile, told the young man that he was in a really unpleasant situation. He had become a target for a wild stray dog. The peculiarity of such stray dogs is that once they get their fangs into their prey, they will never let it go. Asking him if he thought he had any chance of this captain getting away from him anytime soon, but the young man said nothing, only folded his hands gratefully. Running to his old friends, the hero asked one of the brothers if he needed help, and he didn't refuse, telling him to keep up. Throwing his body on Jabek's shoulder, he ran down the cliff slope exactly like Akan, only laughing at the already retired One Y. Sodam, who was observing everything, suggested that the young man learn movement techniques as soon as possible and try to move around as well. The little prankster, without missing an opportunity, hugged the hero's arms again. The little girl was definitely not happy with this behavior of her new friend, and without deviating from her character, she kicked the rascal so hard that he fell backwards. In any case, the young man had to hurry, and he started down the slope the way he was used to and had learned so far. Jabek was already waiting for Woon Wai downstairs, and asked him to help. The older brother told the young man that the crazy old man hinted, and he just wants to vent his anger, and he will make sure that his legs. But the hero interrupted the crazy desires of an acquaintance with the phrase that if they break his legs, he will not stop, hinting at drastic measures. The young warrior's conversation was interrupted by the awakened captain, who was furious at what he had heard and was fixing his battered jaw. Directing his frenzied wild dog stare at the young man, Captain O uttered a pronouncement that would make the man wish he'd had time to kill him. But One Y was not going to be patient and listen to some speeches, but decided to act. Swinging his iron sword, he wounded the former mentor, infusing his blow with internal energy. The wounded man's mouth bled. The iron sword avatar that appeared praised the hero, but also added that he should not let his guard down, as his opponent was a first-class martial artist. It would not be an exaggeration to say that from this moment on, the real battle begins. Holding on to the bleeding wound, the captain rose from his knees, clenching his teeth and fuming at the inclement weather that was only building up, and he didn't understand, for when he checked, the boy had no internal energy. Rising into the air, the young man attacked from above with a good swing of his sword. Captain O had to apply a donkey somersault, marveling that the repeated defeat was close and that he had to apply a donkey somersault fighting this underdog. Speaking to himself, and seeing how much strength the young man had in him, the shaggy-haired captain made the decision that it was extremely dangerous to leave such fighters alive, so it was necessary to finish him off right now. After the decision was made, Captain O's eyes turned red like those of an enraged bull in front of which a cloth is waved. After waking up from the captain's blow, Jabek sat down like a small child, spreading his legs, and watched the battle escalate. Woon Wai misses his opponent's jab and lands a leg kick to the chest that knocked him out cold a bit. Worried about the master of the Southern Sword immediately appeared with questions whether he was all right. The hero, clenching his teeth in pain and hatred, replied that he was fine, and fortunately it was without serious injury, telling his friends that the skills of a first-class master are far above the skill of the average level, and it is worth trying a protracted fight. Suddenly, Jabek, who had risen, was already flying at the captain with shouts, telling Woon Wai that he had fought valiantly without him and so he could now rest and he would manage on his own. But the captain, disregarding the bugs, calmly said that he was interfering with the fight, and punched the guy in the face. But the young warrior was not so simple. Switching his footing and using the skills he had learned, he blithely struck his opponent, knocking him back some distance. Fixing his scarred and bleeding jaw, with a smile and a look of determined madness, the twin said, mocking, "And is this a blow? Yes, compared to the blow of the High Elder it is just a child's babble." Flying with a fist at the captain, the latter strikes another blow, with the words that it will be struck for humiliation during the selection test. Collecting all the blood from his mouth, from his bleeding gums and knocked out teeth, Captain O spit it right into the young man's face. The angry captain swung around, his fists glowing with green flames, and shouted at Jabek that he was a stubborn bastard and struck, but he was able to dodge the blow in time. Woon Wai realized that although he wouldn't be able to stop the captain's attacks, he would still try to do so, going around Jabek and dodging the captain, taking advantage of the moment to strike. The young man's blow went through the trees, blood dripping down the blade of the sword. Captain O's chest was scraped open by the sword, and unable to think of anything else, he decided to break the hero's arm. Now it was the turn of Sodam, who was already bored with the lack of adventure. Furiously striking a huge number of blows, the young man used the technique of 8 lightning-fast strikes with a short sword, a technique that he could freely use with either hand, blood flying in different directions from so many strikes. Because of this, it was not clearly visible where the blows were struck. The captain's body trembled from the great loss of blood, but the blows from the short sword were not fatal, but only to the arm. The opponent was able to block even such a blow. From the arm that had been pierced through, a large stream of energy was emitted from the opponent's arm, causing the young man's organs to turn outward. Jabek, who had arrived, soared through the air and kicked his short sword, impaling the former captain to death, blood staining everything in the immediate radius. The sword's entire blade entered through his arm and reached his face, blood flowing in a steady stream. Laying down his sword, Woon Wai said it was over, agreeing that Jabek's help this time around had come in handy. Even though this was most likely the young fighter's first kill, all he cared about was that his opponent had spit blood in his face, and now the hero owed him his life. Woon Wai stood in front of the young man and asked him if it was true that he was going to fight him later, and unfortunately for him he would win the fight, because that was the only way he could officially become the crazy old man's disciple. Putting his hand on his former friend, just like in his youth, the twin asked another question about the fact that the hero will also ask for something, and isn't it meaningless? The interlocutor answered him that it's not necessary to talk as if he has already won, because the probability is not high that he will be able to confirm what he said with actions. After such presumptuous words of Jabek, Woon Wai proposed to make a wager. The one who would lose would become the winner's subordinate, but the latter only brushed it off and now said that they would decide when the time came. The young man called out to Southern Sky and asked, because he had said that Hea Khan's body lightning technique was more advanced than Southern Sky's Shining Star Swordsman technique, and when it came to movement-related techniques, there was no one better than Hea Khan, and maybe he should try it too. Back in the cave, Jabek told the elder that he had completed his errand, but the latter grabbed his head and asked why he had come back alone, and the latter said that he had come first because his associate was slow and should be there in 30 to 45 minutes. He hadn't even studied movement techniques properly, so he wouldn't be able to catch up even with a strong desire. At this time, the hero had already climbed, rather quickly, up the mountain, heading for the cave. The elder, looking directly into the eyes of his unofficial apprentice, asked why looking at his breathing could tell that he had internal injuries, and asked who had killed the captain. The apprentice pointed his finger at himself and the mentor let him go, saying that there could be no other turn of events. With a sneer, Heiken glanced at the young man and asked with a sneer that he seemed to be badly shaken. But seeing that the hero's body and internal organs were perfectly fine, the elder squeezed his disciple's head in fury, saying that his training time would only be increased. After Zhao Beck started making excuses that it was some kind of misunderstanding, since he was the one fighting the whole time and the ally was just threatening Captain O to strike, the elder threw him into the wall to finally shut up. Akan told the hero what he was staring at, and if there was nothing else to say, let him get the hell out of here. But the man had a question about his desire if he defeated the twin. Woon Wai said, putting his hand on his heart, that he wasn't asking for much, but he had always admired his ability to climb up and down rocks with ease, and if he really didn't want to, that was fine, but he would like to learn his movement techniques. Smiling, the elder asked if his Qigong was about his Qigong, which was a set of techniques that allowed one to move with astonishing speed, jump high, and run on vertical surfaces, and agreed to such a request. The young man realized that it was just a show and the head was confident in Zhao Beck's victory, but still, without showing his sincere emotions, thanked him. Heikan put his hand forward and informed the hero that their battle with the twin would take place in 3 months, and despite Captain O's death, he would still be punished if he lost, so he advised him to train as if his entire life depended on it. The young man's goal was clear, and he wasn't going to give up his opportunity to master Qigong to anyone. His gaze was confident and determined. Being at the river, Southern Sky carefully asked his master how he felt after using the Shining Star technique in battle, but the latter, washing his face, replied that only a miracle and luck had helped him defeat the captain, and if you think about it, his first attack had been very light, and it was most likely due to the fact that the captain had received internal damage from a can. The Avatar said that the young man was right, though it was not a technique per se, but one of the 18 basic sword movements. But as long as they were talking about it, it would not be out of place to mention that the former master would have killed this captain with just one blow. Sodam was very happy for her master, saying that he won and just did well, and when they got rid of one problem, they can train in peace and focus on training. The fight was 3 months away, and judging from the way Zhao Beck fought, he would not be an easy opponent, and Woon Wai asked if they would be practicing sword movements today and waving some sharp red stick. Southern Sky replied that of course they would. If he couldn't use the 18 basic sword movements fluently, then his sword technique would be nothing but dancing with a sword in his hand, and until the basic movements became part of his body, they wouldn't teach him any techniques. Amidst the whispering sword avatars, the hero was practicing his technique hard. Sodam said with a guilty look to Southern Sky not to get upset because Master asked Akan to teach his movement technique because he wanted to learn it from him, just because he started learning martial arts. After all, he had mastered the sword of the Elder's main opponent, and is only trying to master the Qigong of Southern Swordsman's nemesis. Holding his chin, the Southern Swordsman's sword avatar said, admitting that he could have gotten upset if he really thought from such a perspective, but even though Woon Wai was learning the techniques of the previous master, he was not capable of replacing him, and it was natural for a martial artist to strive to learn new techniques. Parallel to Woon Wai's training, Zhao Beck was also training, but his training included completely different exercises. Sitting in front of the elder, the boy was writhing from the beating, but he only arrogantly repeated that he had personally demonstrated the Shining Star sword technique, and didn't understand what was wrong with him. But Zhao Beck was so unserious about training because he underestimated his opponent too much, saying that it's just Woon Wai and he can't even catch up to him. And instantly after these words the young man received between the eyes, hiding his eternal arrogant smile, said that he was a useless moron, and how could one still not understand anything? Woon Wai was currently training alone with only a couple of technique notes, but he didn't have any serious injuries after the fight with the captain. Zhao Beck had a fierce look of surprise on his face, for he had clearly seen the ally being beaten repeatedly. Putting the stick right in front of the unofficial apprentice's face, the head interrogated, did he think that he could not recognize the internal injuries and he should know better? After all, he had fought with him side by side, and did not because of his pride he did not even bother to see what the kid was capable of, missing a good opportunity presented on a platter. Zhao Beck clearly didn't like the fact that Akan kept comparing him to Woon Wai, and so he promised himself that he would definitely win this fight. Getting up from his knees, the young fighter asked the Lord to show him his technique once again. After all strikes are training, and he, son Zhao Beck, will prove that he is much stronger than some donkey from Luoyang. Even while the guy was being hit, he kept telling the elder to just wait and see how he would defeat Wen Wai. Heiakin stopped and said that if he really wanted to give his best, he should prove it with actions, not words, and they were done with this technique for today, and it was time to start learning a new one, which he called this. Thinking that he was already effectively taken as an apprentice, the apprentice said that he would plow until exhaustion, but crapping on that, Akan simply threw the one into a nearby rock again. At that time, Beck's younger brother stood on the rock with his head down, not noticing anything near him. Now it was clear why his head was so bald. The elder was visited by Captain Gu Sangwon, who sat down on his knee and expressed his reverence. But the self-righteous old man said that he could have just left the groceries at the entrance and left, but he had a question regarding Captain O and the cadet, whether they had come today, for after they said they would go to see him, they never returned. Staring haughtily at Captain Du, Akan said he had no idea what kind of cadets and captains they were, so he told him to scram. And anyway, how dare Gu Sangwon bother the Grand Elder because of some mere captain and cadet? Wen Wai had been practicing diligently for a long time. He sat by the waterfall, listening to the peaceful sounds of nature, meditating. Suddenly, a huge piece of ice floe that had broken off began to fall on the hero, flying straight at his head. Hearing the crunch, the young man quickly drew his sword and had no problem chopping the flying block into small ice flakes, which in the end did not hit him and just flew past. Southern Sky's hair began to resemble that of his former master, and from behind he was very much like him. He said that it was pretty good but still not good enough, but the little girl said that it was going pretty good. But cutting their argument short, the young man said that in training it was important to be cool-headed. Wen Wai decided that it was time to move to the battlefield, and with a completely emotionless face, his appearance had not changed much, but now there was emptiness in his eyes. Going to the place of the scheduled fight, the hero asked his friend to be honest with him, and asked him what level he thought his sword fighting technique was at now, and he honestly replied that it was still not good enough, and he was only able to do half of what his master was once able to do. But it was an incredible growth, as he had achieved it in just 3 months of training. The young man thanked his little friend for his help. It was obvious that his hands had seen a lot of hard training during these 3 months and were cracked. Sodam showed up and resented it because she too had been helping and supporting the hero all along. And even if he could use the Shining Star Sword technique, the little girl asked him not to forget that all the battles he had participated in so far, where he had killed 3, had been won thanks to her. Contrary to Sodam's words, Southern Sky said that he was just facing a sparring match, not a fight to the death, and they had another verbal altercation. Wen Wai asked the sword avatar if he had learned only 3 sword techniques in the past few months, if he could win with this knowledge, and he replied that he should not worry, although he had not reached the level of the past master of this sword. But if we only consider the sword techniques, he had almost perfected them, and it was better to focus on these 3, rather than trying to learn every single technique, because he was already very strong. Upon reaching the meeting place, the hero was waiting for the already crazy old man, taking a seat at a distance from the area separated from the battlefield, and asked that the early arrival is worthy of praise and also that he did not run away. Greeting the Lord, the young man folded his arms and replied that sufficient or insufficient readiness would only be known after he had fought. In his face Sodam was once again tormenting the Southern Sky. Behind the elder were his 2 henchmen, twins Song Woo-hyun and Jae Beck. It was clearly visible from them that the 3 months had not been in vain. The older brother's muscles had become even more prominent, and the younger brother was dazzling with his shining completely bald head. The old man began to explain the rules. There was no surrendering and they would fight until one side could fight no more, and it didn't matter if someone died in the end or not. And Wen Wai asked who exactly he would fight with. Jabak, opening his hands and stepping forward, closer to his opponent, said that of course with him, and that he should not look so surprised at his iron gloves, because it is fair, because he has a sword. The hero said that it was quite a worthy remedy for his rusty sword, and wagging his finger like a dog, complimented, considering that one of Heya Khan's unique martial arts was the black steel technique that increased his physical abilities, and teasingly said that apparently that wasn't enough for an equal fight either. The sword avatars nearby were proud of their master's defiant and contemptuous responses. Jabek, on the other hand, was maddened by this, and in an instant he threw himself at his opponent. This behavior for a former friend was expected, So with both hands around his sword, One Y stood and waited for the attack, because if he attacked first, it was easy to take advantage of the distance advantage that any swordsman had. And as soon as the opponent was within the attack radius, the young man used the first technique of the Shining Star Sword, the Slashing Tiger attack, putting his energy into the strike. His swings left bright streaks that resembled icy paths. Jabek was able to withstand the attack by putting his defensive glove forward. And at the same second, the hero's arm was caught by the opponent, calling the one a lowlife from Luoyang. After the opponent restricted the hero's movement, he began to throw countless punches, arrogantly saying that at that second he must be remembering the past. Such words unhesitatingly annoyed the hero. Dodging the twins' punches, One Y punched the latter in the chin, disabling him for a few seconds. The opponent deflected backward, trying to stay on his feet, and at the same time the young man, with the help of a somersault backward, pulled away, because it is necessary to keep the distance. After recovering from the blow, Jabek stomped, and because of the wave energy, One Y was thrown a little further away. But there was only a plus side to it, and the young man said that his opponent's internal energy had increased significantly compared to 3 months ago, whether he hadn't drunk some kind of power elixir or something like that. Jabek's eyes ran a little, and he looked away from his opponent, saying that it was nonsense, and his strength had increased because he had diligently studied Elder Akon's martial arts. The hero briefly even forgot why they were fighting, and from the look in his old friend's eyes he realized he was lying. And you can't tell from the look of the young fighter that in 10 years he and his brother will be one of the strongest in the blood cult, and he may seem like a fool now, but the blood cult has really put a lot into them, and not only martial arts, but everything else, which is also disadvantageous for the hero. Putting his palm to his ear, trying to hear what One Y was whispering to himself, trying to get his opponent off his back and taunt him somehow, One Y made the decision to give his best, so putting everything he could into his punch, he inflicted a significant defeat, leaving a wound on his opponent's body. The enemy did not even have time to see anything. With such an astounding speed the young man struck a blow, from the wound fountain spilling blood. The haughty smile disappeared from the elder's face. The young man looked at the elder carefully. Outwardly he may have looked indifferent, but his expression showed excitement, for it was easy to look at the impossible when the situation was refracted in a way that was not good for him. During all the long and hard training the master had told the twin that in a fight with a swordsman it was necessary to shorten the distance, and not to let him get distant, to be able to block his techniques, and Jabek understood it perfectly well, but could not keep track of the techniques, because the movements were too fast, and after such words the elder struck more and more often. The young fighter lying on the ground was remembering everything he had gone through. After all, the elder had beaten him so many times with the sword technique. It was obvious to him now that One Y had just used the sliding creeper technique. The young man's wounds were bleeding, staining the white snow. The young man called out to Jabek with a question, whether he was sleeping or about to give up, and at the same second, he abruptly stood up, replying that he had no intention of giving up. After all, the opponent's attack and a piece of paper would not cut. He had been trained by Elder Akon himself. He had practiced every day to resist the Shining Star Sword technique, and every day he had practiced to the fullest, and so now he was ready to give his best. The rivalry was growing by the second, and each of the fighters adopted a fighting stance. When One Y took hold of the sword hilt, his opponent immediately remembered what kind of attack was coming. He concentrated the energy in his fist, and immediately made a lunge with his sword. It was definitely the first farming of the Shining Star Sword technique, so he was able to fend it off. The young man was doing his best, but now he realized that Jabek probably knew all the formations by heart, and could easily block them, as well as successfully apply the Qigong he had been taught. The twin, having analyzed that the fighter was going to use the sword of the Slashing Tiger again, remembered that using this technique opened gaps in the defense, and one could have time to strike at the weak point even with his bare hands. When One Y intercepted the sword, with a reverse grip, the opponent once again knew and analyzed that it was the third formation of the Shining Star Sword technique, the sword of the sliding Y's sword. The sliding sword was knocking the opponent out of the rut due to the unpredictable sliding lunges, so there was no point in being distracted by each individual lunge. You have to aim at the young man himself, and suddenly the opponent jumped back, which was obvious, extended his free arm to take a stable stance. It was the second formation of the technique, the reflective clam sword. which converts the force of the opponent's strike into momentum for an equally strong counterattack. If you incorrectly track the trajectory of the enemy's attack, the reflective clam technique cannot be used, and it just so happens that the hero lost his balance. Waiting for the right moment, Beck struck with a glowing fist. Now the Shining Star Sword technique had been defeated, which pleased Beck. The opponent knew all the formation's weaknesses all too well, but Sodam and Southern Sky were very proud of the master. The little girl looked like a true fan of his. They both praised the one, saying that he fought well even though things had gone a bit wrong. Holding his side, the hero was still determined, despite his broken side. His friends told him not to worry, because such wounds and abrasions could be healed simply by cultivating the innate energy of the core. Turning around, the young man felt Akshan's gaze on him. It must be amusing for him to watch the scene as his ward shattered the glory of the legendary Shining Star Sword technique, and it would be the height of folly on the hero's part to continue relying on the same techniques his opponent had repelled. Therefore, 1Y made the decision to use move sword techniques. He might be able to confuse that one, and at first he would think that the young man was trying to improvise and lose the initiative. Beck, looking at his opponent, thought that he was about to receive another attack from the reflective clam sword, but a huge barrage of attacks fell on him, and he was even a little confused. Bullying his opponent, the hero replied that he was too skillful at repelling all attacks, so he decided to come up with something new. Beck could barely block the attacks. Now they were much more swift, but it didn't matter, because if the opponent used the sword of the slashing tiger again, then sooner or later the chasms in his defense would open up again. After waiting for the necessary and convenient moment, the twins struck at 1Y. But the young man was only able to stop the blow with his arm. Even by repositioning his legs and extending his free arm, he was able to keep his balance, responding with a powerful punch, absorbing the energy of the attack he had just made. After that, the hero used the second pharma of the Shining Star Sword technique, the reflecting clam sword, raising a space-filling snowstorm. But after the blow, 1Y's hand trembled slightly and the skin on his palm cracked as if a steel bar had been stabbed on his hand. At this time, Beck took on a new appearance. It was as if rivers of lava ripped through the earth on his forehead and all over his body, and he was breathing billowing air. Southern Sky explained that this was a full metal transformation technique. He had obviously learned it from the elder, and now this fight would change dramatically, and told him to keep his distance. Suddenly the young man was called out by a bulky man who had already approached. Their faces were very close, and the transformed opponent struck. The blow landed on the hero's cheek because he managed to dodge, but if the blow had been at full force, it hardly helped. There was a bleeding dissection forming. The young fighters battled again, but the young man's opponent easily blocked the attacks, once again taking him down. The aura coming from the enemy was very dominant, and the hero was convinced that he had become much stronger. Beck spun in the air like a wheel and flew straight at the young man. But Y was able to block the blow. A staggering fire tortured into his opponent's eyes. And looking for a moment to counterattack, the hero attacked using the second farming technique of the Shining Star Sword, the reflective clam sword. Beck managed to stay on his feet. His nose and mouth were bleeding, and he told himself that his time was running out. Hooking his hands into the ground, the Akan follower raised a huge barrage of flying stones at the young man. It seemed to 1Y that his opponent began to fidget as he continued to fend off the rocks flying at him. The distraction succeeded and the enemy got close to the fending hero. Through the streaming flames of the flames, the young man noticed that his opponent didn't look quite right, but the latter only replied that it was none of his business and told him not to relax, calling him a donkey from Woyang. The case was taking a dangerous turn, and something had to be thought of immediately. Southern Sky said that the situation was not good for 1Y, but for Beck, who was like an enraged bull with eyes flashing red and breath from its mouth to warm the food. The avatar with the previous master had seen he can use this technique many times, but he had never seen the same severely swollen veins and skin falling off in flaps like this. It was clearly a sign of the side effects of the technique that exceeded his physical capabilities, and if it continued like this he might even die. 1Y understood everything, but there was a problem. Either the sword of the slashing tiger, nor the sword of the slithering Wyun, nor any of the formations could hold back the enemy's frantic attack, and in order to win, it was necessary to stall for time and save Beck at the same time. The hero threw a punch, but if the opponent hadn't deflected the blow, he might have unintentionally pierced that one through. The enraged monster grabbed at the blade with practically bare hands, and at that moment, Woon Wai found a way to cut the Gordian knot. The young man grabbed his opponent's arm, intercepting his fingers with his own. Sodam scolded at his master. How could he let his opponent get so close? After all, he was a swordsman. But Southern Sky immediately guessed that his master was trying to resolve the situation through a spirit duel. He intended to mix Ja Baek's aura with his innate energy, and thus undo the full metal transformation technique. Sodam was horrified. How could one waste his innate energy so recklessly? And the friend replied that if he didn't learn the Shining Star energy cultivation technique, it would be tantamount to suicide. Woon Wai was clearly not inferior to his opponent in this fight. It was clearly visible that Ja Baek was expending more energy than the hero, and now that his opponent had forgotten what he was here for, the young man had every chance to win. Swinging around, the hero's opponent grumbled angrily, saying how he could think he could overpower him with such bullshit. And as the phrase ended, Ja Baek's strength and consciousness was leaving him. The metal transformation technique was almost destroyed. There was still a little bit left. But the fight was suddenly interrupted by Elder Akshan, breaking the connection of the fighter's hands and preventing the technique from disappearing completely. Writing it off as him saving the boys from completely wasting his life energy, the bloody old man pronounced that there was no way they could have defeated each other. So this duel was nullified, and then he asked the young man why he didn't use the technique from the secret notes he had given him. Woon Wai waited for this question and replied that he wasn't that reckless, and certainly the head was experienced enough to use the techniques from the secret records, which meant that he was wise enough to know about the peculiarities and weaknesses of the sword techniques. Folding his arms unhappily, Akan realized why the young man had decided to change techniques, and asked who had prompted him to do so. But the hero obediently answered whether anyone can enter his lands without his knowledge. But the elder replied that this is only the limit of his current capabilities, and he still sees his weaknesses well. Woon Wai also asked the head whether he really thinks that the creator of that technique, whose weaknesses are obvious to him, would have left it unchanged and not improved it in any way, and of course he can't know about it. But isn't his guess correct? Akshan's own eyes blazed, and his teeth clenched like those of a hungry, fierce tiger. But the elder still insisted that in any case, this fight didn't count and there was a draw. But the hero was quite disagreeing and tried to defend his point of view by rendering on the spruce-breathing opponent lying on the ground. The young man raised his voice and began to seek justice, asking the bulky man if he really thought the fight would be fair, since he had only his basic energy cultivation skills with him, and with Ja Baek the techniques he had taught him, also a full understanding and knowledge of the weaknesses of the techniques, and an elixir that strengthened his internal energy, plus the rare armor. Woon Wai, breathing in fearlessness, loudly shouted, asking what under such circumstances he could even oppose his opponent, and if he didn't receive recognition after winning, then he should die. Asking the most important question, he was just a pawn to him. The elder only laughed out loud at such words. Tapping his foot on the ground, Akchon tossed his unofficial apprentice into the air. The latter even opened one eye, awakening from the surprise. Grabbing Ja Baek by the jaws, the elder asked who this bum allowed his technique to be used in any way. Turning to Woon Wai, Akan asked why he thought he had not trained the receivers for such a long time and told these two about his techniques. Yes, because their bodies are perfect for the full metal transformation technique, and these two have a much higher blood circulation rate than normal people. Their bodies initially accumulate internal energy faster when applying the full metal transformation technique. The rapid blood circulation will accelerate death, and if you do nothing about it, you can really die, so you need to balance everything out. And it was inappropriate to grumble about the weapon, because the one used a distinguished sword himself, and letting go of his henchman, the one fell right on his soft spot. The sword was really old, but still much better than an ordinary sword. Southern Sky agreed with such praise. Smiling haughtily, the Supreme Elder said that in any case, the young man was right when he said that the fight was unfair. This fight was really arranged so that he would win, and they were just pawns that he used. But that didn't negate the fact that he was brazenly trying to cheat him to win, so that was why he was canceling the agreement. And after saying that, he said that even though he used them, he would also make them his official disciples as well. Woon Wai was astonished, because hearing the truth was at least hurtful and heartbreaking, and the mentor said that they have certain natural talents, innate abilities, such as them, even throw a bone, they will learn to fight on their own, and at least they will not die like halfwits. The young man took a knee and without showing his sincere emotions thanked him for the honor, reflecting that he perceived what he had learned with the help of Sodam and Southern Sky as an innate talent. His friends immediately supported him, saying that he deserved the credit here, because he was special and if anyone in the world could still speak with swords. The elder said that he might not teach Wenhui the fighting techniques that he had taught the twins, but he would help him develop his sword skills, and also asked if he knew that the technique he used belonged to the swordsman of the Southern Sky, the only worthy opponent for him. The hero was very surprised at what he heard. His great acting even took Southern Sky by surprise, asking, "So that skeleton belongs to that swordsman, and the sword he fought with too?" Sodam explained to her colleague that the young man was just pretending, in order for him not to load himself with strange thoughts. The elder said that after the death of Southern Sky swordsman Ho John Day, he became the one who knows the Shining Star sword technique best and can help his recruit master it. Approaching the hero's face, the old man also said that he could help restore Dantian, and asked if he would now become his disciple. Sodam and Southern Sky supported the young man, saying that they would accept any decision he made. It was a good opportunity, and they could always leave if they didn't like it. Only the recovered Jiaobek, screaming, asked what would happen to him and his brother now, and the latter replied that unfortunately he couldn't just let go of those who had learned his techniques, even though they weren't to his liking, so he would take them both. Mocking and teasing the twins, the hero said that he now had 2 younger companions, for he had become the first student, and was very happy to have companions. Opening his hands, the elder shouted, looking up to the sky, and called out to John De to look, for a young man like him had become his disciple and he had finally defeated him. Southern Sky appeared and said he was taking back his words, and if the hero agreed to be this man's apprentice, he would never help him again. The elder, having crossed to the back side of the waterfall, walked to the skeleton, asking how the man was doing. Taking a seat next to the cauldron, the old man was saying that he could finally put it behind him, though no, he was still tormented by the question of who was John Day's killer. One day the master received a very strange summons to a duel. There was a place and time specified, and there was also a flower cut in half. The former sword master had gone through hundreds and thousands of battles, and this day was incredibly excited as he went into the duel, and Southern Sky still doesn't know who his opponent was that day, only remembering that one of his eyes was golden in color. He looked to be no more than 20. But this duel was over in just 40 seconds, an outstanding master worthy of the title of the 8th best master of the Celestial Empire, the pride of Yunnan province. The swordsman of the Southern Sky was defeated, and that was all that was known. Sodam was shocked, and the hero noticed something suspicious about the story, and the little girl told him to choose his expressions. And it wasn't that the swordsman of the Southern Sky had lost, it was that his opponent was terrifyingly strong. Looking at the distraught sword avatar, his friend, Wenhui stopped expressing his speculation, and taking his swords in different hands, the hero ordered everyone to sleep, and after putting them down, wished them sweet dreams. The young man lying on the floor was thinking about the fact that he had turned the topic to the Southern Sky swordsman to make everyone relax a bit, and in the end, the conversation ended on such a note, and judging from Southern Sky's reaction, he was holding back about something. The sword avatar's story does not explain why the remains of the swordsman are in Guangdong province. He was considered one of the 8 best masters of the Central Plains with his high-ranking strength, and how such a person could be fatally injured in a fight of 40 seconds, if the difference in their skills was so great. It would have manifested itself in the first exchange of blows, and 40 seconds would not have been needed, and judging from the words of his friend, it appears that after the fight, the Southern Sky swordsman was still alive and came to the cave to recover from his injuries, and going into the cave to rest and recover to the former owner of the sword approached the one who finished him, and it could be again the same warrior with a golden eye or a third person who watched their fight from the outside. Southern Sky said that he wanted to find an apprentice, but on his way there were no good people, that is, he did not have a receiver, and therefore, killing the swordsman at the time of his weakness, the killer would become the sole owner of the sword technique of the Shining Star. The killer broke the hero's jaw. He broke his hands so he couldn't speak, broke his arms so he couldn't write, broke his legs so he couldn't flee, and these atrocities had only one reason: to master the Southern Sky swordsman's technique alone. Most likely, a cruel faceless assassin forced a great warrior to right away to cultivate innate energy, and after that, stole the most important parts so that no third person would ever know about it. But the young man, theoretically, still became the unwilling recipient of Southern Sky's sword, though not officially, and Southern Sky has a hard time remembering that moment because it was difficult and intolerable for him to watch and not be able to help. For the baby it was a painful memory, so the hero from now on will try not to mention it in dialogues and believe that the time will come when he himself will tell him about everything. But until then he will take care of him carefully. Sodam tried to cheer up her colleague. Now she finally understood his feelings. After all, they were both swordsmen, and could trust each other. The dialogue of the swords continued with Sodam saying that the master probably didn't notice anything. But without missing an opportunity, Southern Sky said that he realized that the young man had guessed everything and understood everything without words. This is probably the unique bond of the swordsman and his faithful sword with which they had been through a lot. The swordsman's reply angered the little girl, and she grabbed the one to punish such words with her huge hands, wondering how he could even know anything about Why, since he had met him a few months later than she did. A craftsman entered the room, and the hero said hello in a friendly and respectful manner. Akan hit the warrior on the head with all his might with his fist, causing him to go into shock. The elder started throwing everyone in different directions, in parallel waking them up and shouting that those weaklings, and becoming his students today, instead of celebrating, decided to sleep after such a small fight. With a confident smile, Akan picked up the container of drink and said that since this was the first time he had taken the students, he was going to celebrate such a thing, and they would not go to bed until they had finished everything. The eyes of the drinkers at that hour glazed over, and insatiable saliva flowed. The young man woke up and walked out of the cave. It was snowing outside, even more than before. Jabek was already waiting outside for the hero, dressed in a hide, who asked the man what he was doing in the morning, and the hero asked how he was feeling. Turning around, there was a huge hematoma on the twins' face, which made the boy's eye barely open, and it appeared after the old man got them drunk and then attacked them, not even thinking that he was just drunk. The young man asked his companion mockingly why he addressed the elder informally. Jabek jumped up and asked why he suddenly called himself an elder, and in fact they were comrades and owed him a debt. Woon Wai reminded his friend about the bet, and gave him 3 options again. Either he would consider him a senior comrade, or he would call him master, or maybe he wanted to fight a second time. Falling on all fours, Jabek called his comrade senior in a trembling voice full of humiliation. The captain came up behind the boys and grabbed Woon Wai by the scruff of the neck and headed somewhere. Using their movement technique, and listening to the disgruntled cries that with their speed, they would age by the time they reached the Valley of Blood. The main pavilion of the Valley of Six Bloods. Huge snow flakes were still flying from the sky, and the place seemed amazing, because even though it was winter outside, there were leaves on the trees with snow falling on them in layers. Opposite the old man, Captain Gu was sitting. They were chatting about medicines and whether his pulse was fine, but suddenly their dialogue was interrupted. The wall suddenly began to crumble from some sort of violent impact. After the collapse of the wall, Akchan was already standing in the room. The men talking about important things surprised greatly and frantically saying hello. Holding Woon Wai like a kitten by the scruff of his neck, he told the gray-haired man to heal the boy. But the hero didn't care about anything. He was trying to save himself from gagging after such a flight. A woman entered the room and told the thug to stop. The 6th star of the blood cult Blood Witch Han Bek Ha. She was an old acquaintance of the elder. Her skin was pale and her gaze was as if she could see right through you. Mrs. Khan asked the crazy old man what the child was with him, and that she had not seen him before. Woon Wai was just about to greet the lady and introduce himself as a Khan. Putting the hero on his head told him to shut up. After all, a student cannot kneel before anyone but him. The girl was lost at such words and attitude towards her student. The sane divine healer entered the room. His gaze was somehow downcast and looked tired. He greeted the elder and hospitably offered him a cup of tea. He was the best physician of the Central Plains. The young man was very surprised, for he thought that the man he initially met in the room and was a healer. He didn't think the doctor would turn out to be middle-aged. Hayakan held out the plaque to the healer with the words that if he patched up the boy and healed his damaged core, he would give him his own nameplate. But the great physician refused because he already even has too many of these plaques from treating important people from all over the Central Plain, and besides, if it's about the damage to Dantian, it's not a matter of life and death and can wait, and he can't afford to take care of the young man by dismissing an important patient. The hero was surprised by the number of plaques. He even saw that there was the name of one of the 4 worst assassins of the Central Plains, and the Elder's plaque has no chance to compare with the plaques of the 4 assassins, or the 8 best masters standing at an unattainable level of skill. Suddenly, the hero saw some shadow enter the office. Probably it was that important patient. Taking the student by the head with his strong paw, Akan began to say that a matter of life and death was about to come. If he did not heal this child, he could only use his energy, which would eventually kill him, well, or he himself would kill him out of pity. The great healer did not give in to the manipulation. Closing the doors, only said that he was sorry, because this was his first student, and if he wanted to kill him, let him do it outside, because he had business to attend to. Out of rage, the elder threw the hero back at Captain Gu, saying that if suddenly his important patient disappeared, the reasons for rejection would also disappear. Mrs. Khan appeared in front of the enraged Akan and told him to stop immediately. The latter became indignant but quickly calmed down, and they fell silent. The young man noticed that after the elder's surprised face, they abruptly fell silent, but the 6th blood star's throat vibrated slightly. But he couldn't hear a word. But he was ready to swear that they were talking through the vibrations. Suddenly Akshan kicked everyone out of the room and asked the blood witch if she was telling the truth, and if she made it up to brush him off, he wouldn't get away with it. But she confidently replied that it wasn't a lie. The hero's stomach was constantly churning after last night's drinking. Most likely he was suffering from withdrawal. Sitting on the stairs, he pondered that it seems that patient is someone really noble. So much so that even the master dare not harm him. And how long will they talk? Sodam and Southern Sky asked the master if he had any guesses about the patient, but scratching his chin he replied that he wasn't sure since the leader of the blood cult was dead. No idea who else the master might show deference to. Sword of the Southern Sky said to his colleague that if you think about it, this was not the first time she had asked one why silly questions. As if he knew the future, he had died and returned to the past to ask him such questions. But in one voice, the young man and Sodam replied that he had indeed died and returned to the past. Southern Sky stunned, realizing then that it wasn't a metaphor. The young man was walking towards some door of the building. He was looking for a warehouse or a kitchen because he was very thirsty after a fun night, and splitting a huge jug of booze for 3 was a bad idea. Entering the room, the hero saw the girl standing with her back to him, and was a little frightened. The little one gobbled up the jerky leg and vegetables with gusto. The girl noticed the intruder and was startled. He was startled too and quickly slammed the door shut, apologizing. The girl rushed after the young man, asking if he was a disciple of one of the 4 high elders, and tearfully begged him not to tell anyone what she had eaten, because she was on a diet. But laughing, the hero replied that the dried beef she was eating was a tomato. But the little girl cut short his words with a cry that she had eaten only a little, because she was afraid of fainting, because she had not eaten anything for days. Choking on the uneaten food, she asked again not to tell anyone, and held out money in return. Having finished his conversation, Akan went outside and called to his disciple to come to him quickly. The young man quickly ran to the master, but the master kicked him again and he stamped into the floor. The elder shouted that he might have to wait for him too during an important battle. The hero admitted that he was looking for a warehouse, in order to drink water, and a voice appeared in his head. The hungry little girl standing behind Mistress Han was talking to him using vibrations, threatening him not to dare tell anyone. When the blood witch heard that One Y had found nothing to take a drink, though there was a storehouse behind him, she turned on her apprentice, suspicious. But, embarrassed and innocent, the little girl lowered her head and said that she had eaten nothing. The young man, looking into the eyes of the blood witch, began to lose himself in space. He suddenly became dizzy, but Akan quickly realized what was the matter, and the new acquaintance warned, calling him an idiot, that he should not look this girl in the eyes, because he was still too inexperienced to resist her power. The elder told the woman not to dare to do any more such foolishness, but that one only giggled, covering her mouth with a cloth, that she wouldn't even dare to do such a thing when one of the 4 supreme elders was right in front of her and asked for forgiveness. The elder was telling his apprentice that it wasn't that simple. He needed to find some kind of medicinal herb or something like that to cure him. The hero immediately realized what flower he was talking about. It was the Lower Dantian revival flower that the divine healer had been searching for in his past life, and the one who brought it first would receive a special tablet with the ability to cure him at any time. And luckily the hero knew where to get it. Akon hoped that the young lady who was previously called an important patient would not get mixed up in the search for herbs. It had been brought to the hero's attention that the girl who stood behind the divine healer's back was the granddaughter of the former leader of the blood cult leader, and if the latter spoke out, he would be killed. A significant figure in the history of Mirim, one who managed to unite many unorthodox sects and dark masters into an organization known as the blood cult to stop it. In the past, the orthodox sects temporarily forgot about their eternal disputes and made an alliance, and even the incomparable, the strongest figure of the time, entered this war, and all because of one man, a blood demon. In a fierce battle against countless of Mirima's finest masters, he still did not escape severe wounds and lost his life. But the Mirima alliance and the incomparable did not rest until they had slaughtered his entire bloodline to make sure that the blood cult could not be revived. Or so they thought until his descendant appeared. Sodam said that thanks to the appearance of the offspring, the crazy old man accepted the doctor's offer. Woon Wai agreed, and it was also a plus that thanks to his rebirth and being a spy for the blood cult, he knows where to find the flower and has a pretty good chance of finding a benefactor in the person of the one for whom the healer is looking for this medicinal herb. But is that enough? Raising his hand towards him, the young man pondered that unless he became stronger, even being in a more advantageous position than in his past life, he would still remain a willless pawn in the hands of those above him. The surprised Sodam cut his dialogue short, asking if he was going to look for her, and why he had laid down. The hero was quite calm that no one would find the herb before him, because there was no point in going there now, because now the flower was sleeping and it would be very difficult to find it. The divine healer's search took 4 days, because he didn't know about this peculiarity of the plant, and as soon as the sun went down and everyone else dispersed, they would go on a search. As night fell, One Y went out to search as planned, but he was not alone in the area. Someone peeking out from behind a tree was following him closely. The young man was in good shape and using the elder's technique from gliding moved through space, shattering the cold air. In his past life, he was envious of those who possessed Qigong techniques. Southern Sky appeared and tried to warn his master that he was being followed, but he already knew it. He didn't think there was anyone who cared about him. The sword told him that they were being chased by the same full girl they had seen in the warehouse, and she was almost as fast as him. Even if he was trying his best to hone her skills, she wouldn't last long with that body, and maybe the young man could get away with slowing her down a bit, and decided that he needed to get the snow dust in the air first. Such a surprise confused the little girl, and her view was now really blocked. But the girl was not as simple as One Y seemed. She was able to bypass the snow dust, and even catch up with the one rising into the air above him. Her fingertips turned into claws and her eyes glowing, pink fire burning in her hand. Using her skills, the little girl restricted the young man's movement and launched her fireball at him. But he was somehow miraculously able to hold off the attack. He asked his familiar why she would attack and chase him. Descending to the ground, the girl said that she had heard that the hero had problems with Dantian, but he was excellent at Qigong. The little girl struck at One Y again, but the latter was very agile. He didn't even realize what the technique was. Her movements were like the lunges of a hawk gliding towards its prey. And on top of that, the girl's hands are surrounded by red chi. She has the techniques of a blood witch. If the fight dragged on, the young man's situation would definitely worsen, and he had no chance against her. So he must try to get the little girl to talk somehow. The young man used his inner energy during the battle to get some chance, and set off the blizzard again. As a real swordsman, the hero distanced himself. The girl asked if he was making a snowstorm on purpose. He shouted loudly, "Why did she chase him? She scared him after all." The little girl, approaching the young man, asked where he liked to go in the middle of the night, and found it suspicious. Such an answer the hero did not consider a normal reason for harassment. The girl told the hero the real reason why she was following him. It was because she probably knew about the medicinal herb that everyone was looking for. But the young man pretended that he didn't know anything and replied that he didn't know where to find the flower, and if he did, he would have looked for it in the middle of the night. But the girl replied that he didn't need to be wary of her and finally introduced herself. She was Ha Young, a student of the 6th Blood Star, and she was actually a friend of the man for whom she was looking for the herb. One Y told the Blood Witch's apprentice that today it was quite difficult to enter the place. He had speculated on the presence of the flower, but realizing that he just wanted to get rid of her, the little girl said that she would give him the plaques with the right to enter the Divine Healer Pavilion in exchange for the flower. Sodam asked why the master was hesitating if the deal was really good. But the man was in no hurry to answer, only lowering his gaze and folding his arms. Smirking, the hero said that if his new acquaintance was so inclined to cooperate, how about another reward? To cement the trust, he asked her to teach him the sliding motion she had used earlier and let it be a kind of prepayment. It was very rude to ask for another master's technique, but a little hesitantly Ha Young agreed, but on one condition, that he would only use it when he intended to kill accurately. Moving with the Qigong technique, the guys were having an informative conversation. The little girl analyzed the young man's skills and said that he was using Qigong with his innate core energy and was approaching his death, and it was better for him to stop, because he would really use up all his life energy. But he had no other choice due to the lack of dantian. One Y also asked how the little girl knew that he knew the location of the herb, and she replied that firstly his behavior gave him away. Everyone in the Valley of the Six Bloods had been prowling around for at least a quarter of the day today. All the older ones she had met here and there many times, but he was nowhere to be seen. And secondly, what confirmed her guess was that when she followed him she felt that he was running in a certain direction and not looking back at all. They finally arrived at the right place and Woon Wai said they should go down now. Ha Young asked if the acquaintance was sure he hadn't told anyone anything about what had happened between them that afternoon, and after annoying each other with their answers they headed for the plant. At last the students reached the coveted flower, which stood already open and all alone. A bright purple glow emanated from it, and inside the petals were round balls that looked like berries. Ha Young, having calmed her soul after finding the herb, exhaled in relief and said that she should go back soon. The avatars of the sword shouted to the young man to be careful. The people in kimonos and masks appeared out of nowhere and snatched the flower from his hands before the hero gave it to the girl. He was amazed that he didn't even feel their presence, and she didn't feel anything either. It only showed that these people were really strong. The man in the kimono and mask holding the plant said that they were not wrong to follow the boy and told them to cut everyone down, because he already had the flower. The young man didn't realize how long the opponents had been hanging on his tail and pulled out the Southern Sky sword. Suddenly, some of the warriors grabbed the hero's arm, asking for forgiveness from a disciple of one of the four elders. One Y's body was struck by many acupuncture points, leaving him immobilized and slumped on the snow. Ha Young was very worried about her new friend. Turning around she saw that the opponents were already climbing up the mountain, and at this rate she would definitely not be able to keep up with them. Looking at One Y she didn't realize what was best to do now, but telling him to wait for her, she went after the kidnappers. The young man didn't understand why the little girl had managed to avoid damage, and assumed she was just stronger than him. And that was all well and good of course, but he was still lying immobilized in the snow. The hero's pressure eased and Southern Sky explained that it was just a reaction of his internal energy. After a while he came back to normal, marveling at the hidden capabilities of his energy. Sodam was very angry at the full-figured girl who had so easily ditched someone who helped her and put some weight above a human. The avatar of the short sword scolded at the hero why he wasn't going to run after them, but he continued to sit on the ground and explained his calm demeanor by saying that that flower was still immature and everyone was very surprised at such a cunning move by the Lord. The fruits ripening in the lower dantian rebirth flower change as it grows. A fully matured plant should have 7 formed fruits exuding a green glow, and in this area such unripe grass grows everywhere. The hero knew full well that the really ripe flower was behind the frozen waterfall, and it was lucky the thieves hadn't swooped down on them sooner, or she would have been taken away too. When he entered the cave behind the waterfall, the young man was enveloped in total darkness. The moonlight did not penetrate there, but Sodam, sharp as a falcon, saw something shining. The plant that Sodam noticed had 7 fruits and a green glow, which only indicated that the plant was ready for use. But the flower was only 2. Bringing his palms to the plant without even touching it, the hero already felt that his palms were frozen and began to cut the plant. It was also important not to damage the roots. The short sword avatar suddenly heard something behind her. There lay a broken blade that most likely wanted to say something. But the young man was too busy, so it was Sodam who took over the business of communicating with the blade. She flew closer to her colleague and pointed her ears to ask what he was saying. She could hear scrappy and 8 lively phrases for them to leave immediately, but the most distinct word was the last word. run. The little girl rather flew to her master to deliver such information and asked him to cut the flower faster and not to ask unnecessary questions, but just to run. From the ceiling of the cave suddenly appeared some giant lizard with a huge long drooling tongue and having 4 eyes. Why couldn't understand what this monster was. None of the avatars had encountered it in the past either. It had a huge tail like a snake but the size of the most enormous bridges. The hero was ready to fight the monster, but there was only the option of fighting blind because there was no light in the room, just darkness as before, but he had taken the grass, so he needed to get out sooner rather than later. The young man was already rapidly heading for the exit, but the giant snake did not like this turn, so he followed his victim. At a small distance, Wonwai had no way to escape from the monster, then moved due to its body structure with amazing speed. Southern Sky suggested the hero dodge and use a sharp punch, which he hesitated, thinking it wouldn't work, but did, because there was nothing to lose. The young warrior ruthlessly, using his reflective clam sword technique, dealt significant blows to the enemy. The hero had definitely hit the enemy's weaknesses, but he still didn't understand what the thing was, and the only thing that was clear so far was that the attack hits were working on him. Sodam noticed that the lizard was beginning to act somehow calmer, as if it was more cautious, and Southern Sky offered to take his chance while the enemy was confused. Therefore, Wonwai was already ready to strike again, using the most powerful technique. One look of the hero inspired fear, and the blow really finished the monster, and it fell down dead. But in the same second the young man grabbed his face, his eyes blurred. Such consequences of a fight seemed quite strange. Wonwai, who fell to the ground, was able to crouch down on his knees and held onto his burning chest. Sodam was very worried about his master. After that, the hero turned off the blood clot in his palm. The young man's poison was spreading all over his body. It felt as if it was rushing up his shin. The veins in the wound area swelled up, and the veins seemed to glisten inside his body and were colored with fire. The young fighter's innate energy fights the poison, but the pain did not subside. The poison was very powerful, as if thrown into the fire. The pain with rapid speed pierced the entire body of the hero. Even in the throat was hot, and he lost clarity of thought. The only way out of the situation was to risk. The hero began to rapidly devour one of the flowers, and maybe it could help. After taking the plant, the young man turned blue. It seemed to him that his entire throat was chained with ice, and it was unbearably cold to breathe, the heat and frost at the same time tearing the swordsman from the inside. The Sodam that appeared told the master to mix the 2 opposing elements, and take control of his energy immediately. Wonwai made a decision that he would act on the advice of his friend, because he was given another chance, and if he cannot cope with such pain, he is no better than himself from the past. Trying after the prompting of loyal friends, the hero really got better. After the young man was safely saved from death, the stars reappeared on his hand, gathering into a great bear. Another universe reappeared before Wonwai's eyes. A familiar voice already spoke that the heavens would open to him when he mastered the sword. It glittered as before, and the hero remembered hearing the voice still with blue fire. But distracted, Wonwai lost his concentration, his body aching and breaking. The 2 energies in his body were coming together in a confrontation. It was hard to tell if they were competing with each other or trying to kill him. Suddenly the young man heard the voice of the Southern Sky. The avatar said that he should not interrupt the circulation of energy and continue to control the innate energy of the core. He should not let him lose control over the 2 energies and not even try to suppress them, but direct them in accordance with the internal flow. Such words puzzled the hero, but he tried. His friend helped him, prompting him to imagine the innate internal energy as a calm lake. If suddenly raging elements, cold and unshakable lake, and yes, flow lost direction, the waves subside when they find their way to the lake. Everything raging in Wonwai gradually subsided. He was shocked. He felt a calmness of his own in his soul now that the 5 elements had stabilized. Right after the hero came to his senses, the little girl started to ask if everything was all right. Sodam was surprised that the young man could hear Southern Sky because he was in a completely different direction. It was most likely that Wonwai started hearing the sword from afar just after hearing the voice of the blue sky. Sodam didn't understand what the blue fire was, but he had already mentioned it. This one from the secret sword records. And taking his sword by the hilt, the boy said that he definitely became stronger every time a star flashed on his hand. The young man at that moment after killing the monster only had one question: the one who obtained the plant had also encountered such a monster in his past life, and Southern Sky speculated that the creature's form might be immortal. Suddenly, slipping, the hero fell off the cliff and flew with tremendous speed downward. Southern Sky told the host to apply his innate core energy to examine his organs. 1Y activated the innate core energy, and was very shocked after analyzing it. The hero's internal energy had increased. He could now utilize the amount of energy he would only have after 30 years of cultivation. A huge dove ball glistening in his body cavity. Southern Sky said that innate core energy was directly related to vitality. Innate core energy was not something that could be easily improved with potions, however it became more active under extreme conditions. The poisonous saliva of that beast and the coldness of the medicinal flower, their interaction contributed to the development of the young man's innate energy. Even if 1Y couldn't use internal energy, but he had innate core energy anyway, and now, as a result of his experiences, his total energy reserve was far beyond the level of a first-class martial artist. Hearing her master's words and finding a special meaning in them, that if he could survive the pain of death, he would become stronger, and she had a great idea, since he now knew how to control poison and cold and they had one flower left, she offered to try again, and if he survived this time too, his innate core energy would increase again. With such words, the hero and Southern Sky were shocked, so they left the little girl to continue lying in the cold cave and started to leave. But she screamed loudly, trying to manipulate, and then apologizing and saying she was just kidding. The warriors who stole the flower, using their movement skills, noticed behind them that they were getting kind of sick. Their eyes were getting dark and their stamina was deteriorating. The men were discussing the question. One of them was interested in asking his captain how the guy they were chasing, whose dantian had been destroyed, was able to keep fighting, and they were of course able to take the healing herb. Having caught up with her foes, the little girl was already in front of them, overtaking them, and with burning eyes threateningly, told the thieves to return the flower immediately. The warriors were shocked that a full-figured girl could use the techniques and dodges of a blood witch despite not having the most suitable physique, but thought that if they fought her head-on, things would be much easier. Without having time to make a lunge, touch and finger the girl, the bodies of the men were chopped into many pieces. The lightning-fast blows that appeared, accompanied by bright bloody streaks, immediately caught up with them. The lightning-fast reaction and killing of the warriors was the hand of the bloody witch of the sixth star, who calmly sank to the ground after the defeat of the enemy and approached her apprentice, saying that they only hoped for a stolen reward, and thought that there was no instant revenge. The witch said that it was nothing bad, and it was good that she was not hurt. She was very surprised when she saw the same medicinal herb in the hands of her student. After handing the flower to the mentor, Lady Han said that the flower was now safe and she could go back. But Ha-young still had urgent business to attend to and must first return to where she was chasing the thieves from. The young man was amazed at his new abilities. Now he could easily jump high and move around more easily. Southern Sky said that the innate core energy was the power of life, and as it increased, all physical abilities would improve as well. 1Y and the sword avatars noticed the little girl running towards them. He was surprised that she was still chasing after him. Even a normal person running long distances takes a lot of energy, and with her physique it takes a tremendous amount of energy, and apparently she has great willpower. After finally reaching her new friend, Ha-young was breathing hard and worried about the hero. She was happy that he was okay, and also apologized, because she should have taken care of him first and not immediately rush in pursuit. But the young man calmed her down, saying that everything is fine and she did the right thing in that situation. The decision was right, and he was not so badly hurt. Suddenly the little girl noticed her friend's leg and got upset, shouting at the thieves, but he calmed her down again, saying that everything was all right, it was just a scratch, and asked if she had gotten her flower back. With a slightly embarrassed face, she replied that her master had helped her pick up the flower a little, and she immediately hurried back to him, just in case she decided to give the healing herb to the master, and asked her to take it to the divine healer, and said that he would definitely get his tablet as agreed. But the young man did not believe it. How could the blood witch take and give away the tablet just like that? After Ha-young said that it was likely that the student would ask for something in return again, his pupils narrowed, and in that case, the course of the story might have changed. Mrs. Han repeated that for the plaque, One would only have to fulfill her request, and then she would easily give the plaque away. Elder Akona was not satisfied with such terms and said, "Didn't she say she wouldn't interfere, and how dare she demand such things in return for some plaque for a student?" The Blood Witch repeated to her colleague that whether he liked it or not, there were only two options, the first being, join the Blood Witch cult, or there was still a second option. The two elders, speaking of the second option, hinted at some individual with a straw samurai hat, red flaming eyes, and hair like tongues of flame. Standing at the door to the healer's office, the Blood Witch said that sooner or later the bulky man would have to make his choice, but the latter was very angry, saying that did she really think she would take such extreme measures for the sake of some disciple's dantian? After all, he would give up anyway. Why waste time? After saying that, the witch replied that in that case, she couldn't hand over the divine healer's plaque. Two disciples of the elders entered the manor, carrying on a dialogue. The great healer said that he was sorry, but they had to get the flower again, because this one was immature, its healing properties were not enough. A fully mature flower should have 7 green pearls, but this one had only 5, and those were purple. Interrupting the already frustrated masters, the hero replied that there would be no need to look for a flower because he already had a fully matured flower of the healing herb. The healer was surprised by the unusual coincidence that two people had found such a rare herb at the same time, and this flower inside the petals actually has 7 fruits. And no doubt this is the one. Ha Young was very angry and dumbfounded. She used her vibrations to ask Woon what was wrong with him, why he had withheld it, and deceived her. Not knowing how to answer her, the young man, just as he communicated with the swords, replied that he had handed over the flower as agreed, and she was the one who had broken the contract, although the part about teaching techniques didn't apply. The hero asked the wizard if he could ask him one question. He heard that he was supposed to be given a plaque. Did he get it or not? The captain replied that he didn't get any plaque. The witch said that if he didn't do some favor he would never get the plaque. The Blood Witch felt very stung and ashamed. She was lost. After Elder One Wise words, he smiled and asked to take care of himself. Shortly before Ha Young and the young man arrived in the Valley of 6 Bloods, she tearfully proved that there was no reason not to trust her master. The advance payment was for training techniques, so all the conditions would definitely be met. The young man said that he trusted her, but he wasn't sure if the Blood Witch would give up the plaque, and let him think about what he could do if he wasn't given the plaque. Sweating and turning away, the little girl said she was sure of her master, and he had no reason to doubt her, and the hero offered to make a wager. Since Ha Young is betting that the 6th star can be trusted, and when she handed her the flower, mentioned that the two of them found it together, and she's well aware of it, the little girl confirmed everything. But suppose he's right, and she doesn't give up the divine healer's plaque, then shouldn't he get something else just as precious? And remembering that her friend was acquainted with some noble man, she confirmed it, and the young man, moving away from the question, replied that if she was right, he would get the plaque from the master, and he would not need anything else, and if the boy was right, he wanted the little girl to ask for the plaque from the divine healer himself. Dropping to her knee, the Blood Witch apologized to the elder, cutting off her fingers and putting her hand to her palm, for addressing him disrespectfully, and said that a whole hand would not be enough to make amends, but humbly asked that it be taken into consideration that she had important duties to perform for which she needed both hands. But with a haughty look, Akan replied that the devil hadn't apparently lost her mind yet, and accepted her apology. The divine healer asked him not to do anything inappropriate while he had an important patient. Elder Akshan said to the healer that he had better keep his promise, and he replied that he had already taken his flower, but he had a patient, and would take a few minutes to see him. But after looking at the little girl, he changed his mind and suggested that he come at noon. Noon the next day, as expected, in mountains like these, Hayakan's movement technique is the most effective. Sodam thought it was strange that anyone who looked at Ha Young would consider her. Yesterday, the divine healer looked at her and suddenly decided to accept it after all. The Blood Witch earlier looked at her and changed her attitude as well. And on top of that, this girl just stood there and watched the teacher cut her fingers as if she was putting herself above the Blood Witch. Such a remark of Sodam was quite real, and Woon Wai, if right, believed that she wasn't just a Blood Witch's apprentice, saying that she was probably the granddaughter of a blood demon. Such words from the master stunned the sword avatars. And how did he even come up with such an idea? To have her and the descendant of a blood demon. Maybe she had gained weight too, so no one would guess. If all of the hero's musings were correct, It turns out that she is the future heir of the blood cult, although outwardly not respectable. Such a disease is a curse for both women and men, and besides, the woman who stood behind the healer was probably a doppelganger, and no wonder if many are looking for the heir of the blood demon to use for their own purposes. Southern Sky noticed another strange point. This territory is under the control of the blood cult. Are even they here forced to hide their identity? And then, the young man's conclusion is not necessarily correct. And why did he even think that there is only one heir of the blood cult? And if there are several blood descendants, what if they all want to become the head of the clan? Such an option is quite possible. Suddenly, One Wide began to hear many different swords at once. They were all thirsty for blood and killing. In front of the hero stood a woman in a straw hat, with red fiery hair, and she asked the man who he was and how he got to the temple. Before he could introduce himself, a woman peeking out from under her hat rudely said he was too slow to answer and slapped the young man. The woman was amazed that some disciple was able to withstand the blow. One Wide didn't realize who it was. She called him slow, back when he had just opened his mouth, and she was incredibly strong. Smiling broadly, the bloody lady bare her sword. After her strike, the young man felt pain, as if his entire insides had been turned inside out in one fell swoop.